Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 41 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host, Tyler Schatz, who just rode into King's Landing on a white horse. Joining me this fine recording session are one Stephen Howard,
whose team is not the only one who got burned by Green Bay Packers. Can I redo that? Who's not the only one who got burned by Aaron Rodgers? No, that sucks too.
who's not the only one besides Aaron Rodgers who got burned.
Yeah, see, I'm trying to come up with something about Aaron Rodgers being in there, but it's not going to work. So I'm just going to say instead of that,
take your keyboard, Steven, and you write a sentence and you read it out loud and you be prepared.
As we're watching the city of King's Landing burn worse than Steven is right now.
Ooh. That. Move on. I'll move on.
We'll give you till the end of the episode to come up with this here. Also joining us are one Amanda Howard,
Who hopes that when she's thoroughly wrong about something and is losing, is every bit as smug as Cersei was walking around the Red Keep.
one Nick Castillo.
Don't have love here, so let it be fear.
And last, but certainly never ever least, one Gary Delaney.
On paper, this episode should be good. However, what comes out is something that would probably be written in a freshman level creative writing class. I mean, it has dragons, ship battles, disorganized military tactics, conspiracy, betrayal, military executions in a secluded area, heartfelt apologies before those betrayals, Shakespearean forbidden romance, revenge, sibling rivalry in a murderous family, a military attack obscured by the rising sun, a Mexican standoff, a sword fight that has several ripoffs of The Princess Bride, a cutthroat ruler watching her people suffer, a personal connection to the ground level chaos of a military atrocity, the descent into madness, and a character who goes completely wildcard for no reason. They close the gates, but it's okay. I know a shortcut.
Bravo! That was my favorite ever, Gary.
Take it back. I don't have that many long notes, apparently.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I wrote the morning after I watched the episode. I was like, okay.
Did it just come to you in like a vision there or something like that? Oh God, I gotta get some pen and paper and write this down.
He just zoned out the entire time and just starts writing.
It was mostly the fact of just how conspiracy, betrayal, revenge. I was like, this is on paper something that these are what we need. This makes a good story. But execution was very, very poor.
I am just blown away. I am blown away, Gary.
Well, we're going to have to end the episode there. I don't know how we can pick up.
All right, guys.
Good
game. Good game.
All right, so we are here to discuss Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells. Forces have arrived at King's Landing for the final battle. And what an episode this was for all sorts of reasons. And already Gary wants to ask a question or say something after he just had his long rant.
He's met his quota already.
I mean, we might have to kind of just stretch this out to let Gary not talk for a little bit here.
Can we just say wrap it up, Gary?
We could do that.
Hold up your side, wrap it up. Okay, Gary, you go ahead and talk.
My note was before the episode began, and that was on the previous episode section, and there was a lot of references and voiceovers of Targaryen history. We are not our fathers from Tyrion. Every Targaryen is born. The gods flip a coin, as Cersei says. Do not wake the dragon. That one guy who died in season 1 said. Her brother. Viserys. So I thought that was very, interesting that it's been mentioned in the past that if you watch on the previous episode, there's a lot of foreshadowing and explaining how we got from point A to point B. And so that was notable, I thought. trying to
had the same
explain,
note.
maybe a plot points that move very, very quickly.
I had the same.
That was all I
plot
had.
points.
Back to you, Tyler. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Wow.
Terrible.
Poor Nick.
What is going on
Same
here
quotes.
right now?
Nick. Sorry.
It's all right. I apologize. I should have had a longer intro like you did. No, I had the same notes too, Gary. I also commented that whole soliloquy is put right over top of Dany's face. We don't see any other flashbacks to those scenes where people said that. We just hear all those comments being made as if right to Dany and a focus on her face.
I
Very
did
foreshadowing.
Soliloquy.
I did
Soliloquy.
catch that too, actually, Gary, on the previous episode. I usually skip that because I'm like, I've seen the previous episodes. I know what happened to get here. But this one, I was just too lazy to reach out. Like, I was just happened to be far away from the remote, couldn't hit it in time. And yeah, I think they actually did that really well. As they did that flash, I think they held the camera over her face as they like repeated all those things. That was actually kind of a handy thing to have right then. A little more explanation when you think of it all at the same time.
Another good one-liner in that particular bit was also that Aemon Targaryen, the old man the old maester at Castle Black, says a Targaryen alone in the world is a terrible thing. Had several themes of Dany being utterly alone, and she felt betrayed, but more so people came to a stronger realization of who she maybe really was. But I had several thoughts of loneliness and her being alienated in this episode.
Yeah, and also layered meanings of a terrible thing for her and a terrible thing for others, apparently.
So I guess I don't really have much of a thing to start off with, other than I just wanted to kind of read out the little bit of text that I could take away from Varys's letter he was writing there at the introduction. This isn't completely word for word, but a lot of it is like, so I caught like Rhaegar and Lyanna's son still lives, hidden by Eddard Stark, heir to the throne, were some of the big pieces I got out of there. And it's made to kind of seem like he's writing a lot of notes. So I'm kind of wondering here, and this is something I saw online at one point in time too, is did he send any of those notes out, or was he just basically stockpiling them to send them all at once? Because obviously, if that information gets out, it's a big deal. But it's like, okay, well, did it get out?
So you're saying he's stockpiling the messages so that they all could be sent out via Raven at once, but it's not a message you can trust to other people, so you have to handwrite all of the messages and like hide them in I'll just stop there. You just hide them.
I mean, like he had a bunch of them piled up on the table there too. So I mean, he was
So
writing.
did any get out, or did he
Yeah.
wait? Hmm.
Go ahead, Nick.
I think he's been sending them out. I had the same note about one message or multiple being written. We see him writing later on too when he's caught, and so I think because the little girl Martha who comes in his room says she thinks they're following him, which means like she's walking. Why else would she come in? Like they don't talk about like what have you heard? What's going on? They do talk about Queen Dany's not eating, but to me, it seems more like little birds have been coming to him and he's writing multiple messages and having them get them out of the castle somehow. I got the feeling, at least, that there were multiple messages and they may have already gotten out.
I'm gonna put a pin in that one there, Nick, because I'm curious about like the next episode and everything like that. Where, because again, this is the news that Daenerys Targaryen is not the last Targaryen. That there is really a true born male son who would have the claim to the Iron Throne over her.
I have a conspiracy theory about that little scene you mentioned.
Okay.
Say it.
Yes, conspiracy theory number 1, in honor of Gary, making sure I say it correctly. That scene where Lord Varys is talking to the little child Martha. What do we think that possibly she was? What are the chances she was feeding Daenerys something to drive her into madness and therefore make Varys' candidate for the throne look better by comparison? I can see Stephen's face automatically being unimpressed.
No, I'm thinking about it.
I would go with the fact that he was just trying to poison her, basically, give her the quickest death out.
That's what I assumed at first, but
It's an
I
interesting
saw an
idea.
opportunity to be difficult about it, and so I took it.
I think it's completely believable, but also, I mean, it could be poison, or it could just be that he's trying to surround the queen with other people to kind of sort of see if she's, how she's taking the news, because I think it's maybe proof that the queen is still an unknown quantity to Varys. Like, he doesn't fully understand her. Like, King Robert was a sex fiend, and Joffrey was a sadist, and Cersei was just an idiot. I don't know.
Yeah.
Strange, like he fights so hard through the shadows and does so much work trying to find a better ruler, and then like doesn't seem to fully do the research for what he's getting into himself into. Because for a while there, before he knew what was like he was promoting her brother to be Viserys before he died.
It's almost like the guy who's supposed to be the master of knowledge, the keeper of secrets, and everything like that, is terrible about his own job.
Who would know? Why would anyone say that?
I did have another kind of point touching on our friend Varys here. There's a conversation he has with Jon as soon as Jon arrives at the beach there to greet him, to kind of, it seems like he's poking and prodding around Jon, of like basically saying, I know who you are, really. You should be the rightful king. But then my question was kind of more of that you later find out Tyrion is watching this whole thing go down as well here too, and I'm kind of like, why is Tyrion up here watching it? Is he trying to like get a sense of what Jon would say to maybe see whether or not Tyrion is on Varys's side and Varys's plot against Dany there? Because if he's got somebody to take Dany's place, does this maybe make the pill easier to swallow for Tyrion of pushing Dany out of the way? Gary.
I also kind of noticed that exchange, but I did notice that Varys never specifically said the words out loud. He spoke he kind of sort of led into the conversation in such a way that to assume that he knew nothing, to like slowly let out little breadcrumbs about he knew more, of like, oh, well, how do you think she's doing? Like, oh, well, what if there was another option? And then it comes to the realization that they both know, but he never says it aloud, because he's not willing to make a full-on betrayal. And then maybe it's just proof that like you gotta get the sense that he actually does believe that Jon is an honorable man, and that he trusts that if he tells Jon his opinions, Jon's not going to hold it against him, and Jon's not going to specifically turn him in. I don't know. I guess, what is other people's thoughts? If you feel like, do you think Jon would have turned him in if Tyrion didn't?
No, I don't think he would have. But that being said, I also have a different take on what Tyrion's doing here, and I think it's just I think Tyrion is seeing everything that he thought that he had ready and set up. Like, he thought he was doing a perfect setup here to replace, his sister and all that sort of stuff. But he sees everything flying out of control, just spinning so quickly and breaking apart in so many different ways that he just seems defeated. This entire episode, Tyrion seems defeated from the first that we see him to the last. There is no usual, spice to him. There's no fight to him. There is only acceptance, maybe would be the best way of putting it. There's certainly reticence, and it's he does. I think that he watches that entire scene without commenting because he's just like, "What the f is going on?" And then just goes and reports it. It's acceptance. I don't think he has any zeal left at all. Gary.
I was gonna ask if maybe Tyrion is maybe thinking about it, but Tyrion hasn't turned the corner yet, or that for Tyrion, it's not the time to do it yet. Like the feeling that Varys is jumping the gun, that they should wait until after they take King's Landing to betray her. Because if you kill Daenerys, you lose the magical Dothraki and the magical Unsullied, who are immortal.
Yes.
And will those people follow Jon? So, do you need to keep Daenerys alive in order to win the battle? I don't know.
They're not immortal,
Tyler?
Gary. They just keep springing out of the ground randomly.
They're
But-
like the Highlander.
I don't think that's
Unless
how
you
the Highlander
decapitate them,
works.
they'll still keep living.
Yeah, there's
Um,
there's more of them than one.
Steven, you brought up something that kind of put a thought in my mind here too of, Tyrion it seemed like came over, had this perfect plan of how everything was just going to work out beautifully. They were going to not kill a whole bunch of people. The Cersei would just surrender and everything would be a peaceful transfer of power and all of that stuff. And I now question here, and maybe I've raised this before too, but now is it maybe more and more seem like Tyrion is not as good of a hand as he's portrayed to be, even when he was in King's Landing. To kind of counteract that there, not counteract, but to push against that tier two, Tyrion's time as hand in King Landing was when everything was, for the most part, peaceful. Everything was still kind of order as, everything was still, there was no chaos. There was still an order to everything. The families and all of that stuff were this. There could have been a wild card here or there and everything like that, but it seems like Tyrion's basic knowledge of the different families and what they would possibly do helped him in there. But then everything just kind of started spiraling out of control for him, where he then lost the hand of the kingship and everything like that because he wasn't as good as he thought he was in the capital. And now it's only further compounded. I believe I've mentioned this before. Like when he was overseas, he doesn't know this area. He doesn't know this people. He makes the mistake with the masters, which then they come back and assault the city of Marine. And then again, like I kind of mentioned at the start of this thing, his whole plan just completely fails from the second they get to Westeros there, of how to combat his sister. So it's like, well, are you really as good as everyone thought you were then, Tyrion? I'll go ahead, Nick.
I think to that immediate point that you were just talking about, I think that his battle prowess as a hand peaked during the original Siege of King's Landing in the Blackwater Bay. He had a good setup for that, which was an elevated situation above a peaceful time. So he did have some turbulence there, but he read through the books and tried to figure out what to try and do. He has that scene where he's trying to put up the defense of King's Landing. So he does have some battle prowess and understanding of it. But again, that's like what I'd imagine is the average, hey, we're being sieged by people on horses, maybe since we're on the edge of a continent, a country, like by water perhaps, like Stannis does. Adding dragons adds this whole nother fantastical level of how do you do a good siege that I don't think anyone can account for. So I think he's way out of his depths with such a large host in his current situation. Tyrion's strengths are when he talks, but there's limited talking when you're as foregone towards war as hellbent as Dany seems to be. So I think he's out of his depth. I don't think he's a very good hand here.
I will agree with that, and I'll take it a step further to where Tyler was alluding. I think he's been out of his depth for a while now, and I do think that he thinks, and it is made to be that the maybe throughout this entire show that he is so smart, he's so clever, and I might be actually quoting Cersei by saying that, but he's not as smart as he thinks he is. He's not as clever as he thinks he is. He's not as clever as the average reader would like to believe. He's a great talker, like Nick says. He is a fantastic talker. And one of the things you can do real well if you are real good at talking and talking fast is make it seem like you are just clever and you are smart. You can talk your way around anything. I mean, you get back to ancient Greece. That was the cult of there was a boo history. There was a cult of somebody and another, but they basically it was a cult of people who thought that speaking and knowledge of oratory and knowledge of how to talk circles around people was more important than actual knowledge, because you can go into a debate and it doesn't matter if you're debating a professor. If the professor can't keep up with the way that you're talking, you can make him look like an idiot, and everyone walks out of there and goes, oh, Stephen was so smart, and everyone else that might actually know what's going on goes, holy crap, what just happened there? Stephen's an idiot, and everyone just thought he was right. And I think we've seen this in our national political discourse, but we've also just, unfortunately, he's too. Everyone likes to think he's too clever. We needed a hero to root for in this show, and it was Tyrion. Everyone wanted to root for Tyrion. I got a whole bunch of signs.
Holy cow!
How many signs was that, Gary?
That was almost impressive.
2 Stephen was wrong, 1 too far, and 1 we need a hero. Oh, and a boo history. So
And a boo history.
I think that you all are wrong. And going back to Tyler's point about, I think it comes down to that Tyrion doesn't know the pieces on the board of the 7 kingdoms as well as he used to. Dorne has a new ruler. The Riverlands has a new ruler. The North technically has changed houses a couple times. The Reach has been destroyed. And so the only thing that exists is still the stronghold of Castle Rock and King's Landing. Like every other piece on the board, the Lannisters have destroyed in one way or another. So he doesn't understand the pieces on the board as well as he thought he did.
So I would say that you are kind of saying that Tyrion's knowledge has been superseded by events. He doesn't know, he might have had the past knowledge, but he doesn't have the current knowledge. And in that way, you could say it's the same thing as the professors of the 1800s were brilliant in the knowledge of, I don't know, say, Newtonian physics. They could absolutely know everything about Newtonian physics that possibly could exist. Well, get Stephen Hawking in there, and a couple hundred years later, they were all wrong. They were 100% wrong. And it doesn't matter if he was intelligent or that professor was intelligent back in the day. It matters what's true now. And what's true now has been superseded by the events. He's still, one of the things about being smart, and especially about being wise, which is something we haven't even discussed, is Tyrion wise? We're talking about smart and clever. We're not talking about wise. But one of the things that is needed in a hand is the ability probably to look at a situation and go, I don't know. I need more information. We need Varys. We need spies out there. We need to learn what the situation is. And if Tyrion can't do that, he's a bad hand. That's kind of a shut and closed case.
Well, all I was saying is that, like, what are the major houses in Westeros has completely changed since season 1. So, like, and when he left, like, yeah, all those, yes, events changed not only the power of each house, but how they would act. Like, the Rose people, the Tyrells?
The
Rose people.
Before he left, the Tyrells had a grandma, a father, and a daughter and a son. And when he came back, there was only the grandma left. So that really changes how that house is willing to do things, and how do you they weren't making smart decisions. she was just acting in revenge. So that's anyway. I'll wrap up there, Nick.
I was just going to bite really quick on Steven's comments about is Tyrion wise. In a succinct way that I can say it, wisdom is usually viewed in a successful or unsuccessful way. If I think I'm wise, but everything I do seems to end in folly or negativity for me, then you would say that person's very unwise. Versus if I do something, even in the long game, that seems to pan out in my favor, you think somebody's wise. So in the view of these episodes we've seen, kind of in the last few seasons, like we talked about Marine too, I would say Tyrion would be unwise, because whether or not his intelligence is helpful from this period or from his past knowledge of the Westeros culture, he's ended with things that have been unfavorable for him and his team. So I would say he's unwise.
And I would go a little bit further than that, and I would say I always judge people by if they're in a leadership position and they can't get something done. There's one of two things: they're either impotent or they're incompetent. Those are the two things that cause you not be able to get something done. And in this case, I don't know whether Tyrion is impotent or incompetent. He seems like he should be able to do, but then he suggests going over the seas, and we've talked about going over the seas before. Then he can't convince Dany of certain things. So that's, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, but leads back to I agree with you. I don't think he's wise. Nick.
There's a part of that. I like the black and white of incompetent or impotent, but the stakes stacked against Dany and thus against Tyrion do have a little bit of merit. So I'm a little bit between you and Gary, because Gary's right. Like in the city of Marine or even Westeros, the powers against Tyrion, he only has so much power as, truthfully, a dwarf. He's not very powerful, but he's also not completely incompetent, because he can't do anything against Marine because he is impotent, but at the same time Dany's able to overcome them with the power of her dragon, so definitely not impotent. But then that doesn't necessarily kick her into competency, because we've pointed out several times that what she's doing is not the wisest thing either. So that's somewhere in the middle is where I'm at. And
I think it would also, for me, matter if I could see the other things. I don't know if every decision we're being shown is him being him being unwise because he's not getting it done, or if they're just showing us the ones where it's fail. Has he done in between those 10 other things that have been a rousing success? I don't know.
You're asking if he's a good party planner or what other skills he brings.
Is he succeeding 90% of the time, or is he just failing every single time? And we're just, maybe we're only seeing his failures. I don't know. Because at this point, the show writers, they have much less book material to work. They have no book material to work with. So I don't know if this is just them saying, yeah, every decision of his has been kind of a failure lately, or if they're just cutting out the others because they don't have the more background information to give. Because Tyrion is still viewed as a wise person, more or less. So is he still doing other things, and they're just used to it, taking it for granted, and being like, well, here's all your failures, we only see them because we're used to you being better. Sorry, Gary, go ahead.
Is he a good consultant for her fashion, for her wardrobe? Is he consulting on that? That was my joke. Sorry, everyone just shook their heads and just looked disappointed. So we continue.
I award you no points. God have mercy on your soul.
All right. So I'm going to succeed now my time over to somebody else to start their points of discussion, other than I want to just call out rest in peace, Ferris. You went out quicker than most people have with Dragonfire.
That's true.
Nick, you already have your finger up, so you can go ahead and start talking with some of your points.
Varys also didn't scream in that scene too, so it was either really quick or he just kind of accepted his fate. I thought that he resigned himself to, he knew it was coming, knew the consequences of his actions, but wanted to try and hold to his own moral self. I think he was the most loyal to himself and his values in this whole episode. I have a couple notes about Jaime, who I thought was not very loyal to his own code of conduct at the very end, but more on that later. But yeah, Varys also had a comment too. We kind of talked a little bit about Varys talking maybe preemptively with Jon before talking with anybody else. And Varys also has another line in there about the queen has been left by herself when they're coming in on the beach, and Jon says she shouldn't be left alone. Again, I have a theme of many people making comments about leaving Dany alone is not wise, and people recognizing this, that's a terrible thing, but not seemingly doing anything about it.
That's fair.
Yeah, they mentioned how she's been a little estranged. She hasn't been eating well, and how they Varys says Jon admires her, and Jon says she shouldn't be left alone. So again, not very good. And then also in that interchange, Varys quips back when a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin, and he says, "I don't know which way. I don't know which way her coin has landed, but I'm sure about yours." Which is another tieback, as that was also one of the one-liners that Gary pointed out. They mentioned in the previously on. All these themes that repeat seem to be pointing towards something. And yeah, Varys also has a comment in that little interchange with Jon about men decide where power resides. A little sexist, but also we've had many conversations about where power resides over the seasons. The one where Cersei is talking to Littlefinger and says power is power, not knowledge is power, and she threatens to have him killed. And then also there's the one where Varys and Tyrion are talking about the riddle of the rich man, the sellsword, the clergyman, and the king tell the sellsword to kill the other, who lives, who dies. And they say power is where power resides, who's the most powerful person in the story. So there's a lot of little references there that I thought were interesting callbacks to the understanding of what's true power. And ultimately, I felt it was kind of the choices that we make, because there's a lot of discussion about Varys decided to make those choices, Jon decides to make his choices in the absence of choices, maybe, and Tyrion makes lots of choices in this episode that we've already talked about are wise or unwise. Those were the ones I had on Varys before I go to the next one. Tyler.
Is it really a callback, or is it just the showrunners recycling materials because those were hot lines when they first dropped them?
Oh, come on.
Steven?
Yes, the episode is not great, but the whole episode is not crap.
Let it be known that Nick is wrong. The whole episode is crap. Back to Steven.
I'll be very honest. I just forgot what I was going to say because that just threw me off. Shoot, what were you saying that I had a point about, Nick? I do not remember. Sorry.
Crapping in the toilet and saying, "Man, it stinks in here," as if it's new news. Already aware of it. I was talking about the different interesting points with Varys. In that particular scene on the beach, he's talking with Jon about Targaryens being left alone, gods flip a coin, where power resides.
Anyone else think it's interesting that Varys, like, Tyrion told Dany that Varys had betrayed her, but like, what is the actual action? Like, he was reluctant to commit an outright thing. Like, she didn't read out a charge or anything. It's presumed treason, but like, he didn't actually do anything yet. If it was just for the action of considering it, then why isn't Jon Snow being burned alive too?
So, because there are first, she needs Jon Snow. I think even she recognizes that she needs Jon Snow.
That's what I think too.
She is running, it's not a dictatorship she's running. She's running a totalitarian dictatorship. And the difference between those two is at a dictatorship, it doesn't matter what you believe. You just have to follow the leader. And as long as you follow the leader, you're fine. In a totalitarian dictatorship, you have to actually believe the correct thing. And I think that she was wary of him at first. And when it was just said that, hey, he was plotting against you, she doesn't need any more evidence. He's not with her anymore, so death. You don't need that firm evidence if you're already being suspected.
She's the one who wants to be a good queen and everything.
No, she doesn't.
Yes, she does. Gary, real quick, I'm so sorry. I know you're next, but I do appreciate that you and I both rolled our eyes like at the same time in response to Steven. Like in
About
sync.
dictatorships?
As soon as he said it, both you and I just roll our heads. Like, it was great.
I also noticed, and in the initial scene when you see Dany, she's very pale and very unkempt, and I think that's supposed to be a sign that she's been alone, she's been in grieving. But then all of a sudden, when she burns someone alive, she's very, very put together. She's very, very like I'm a goddamn ruler. And almost as if the brutality is a comfort to her.
Conspiracy theory
Like-
number 2. Daenerys is
Ooh.
actually a secret redhead and needs the souls of other humans to survive.
Oh my God.
Oh,
To all our redheaded listeners out there, we apologize.
I apologize for nothing.
Mm.
Oh, I accept that conspiracy
that-
theory as a very much possibility.
I had one more comment about Varys, and then I was going to jump to the comment about the unkemptness, because I also had a note on that too, Gary. John talking to Varys on the beach, when Varys says, you know what she's plotting, like we need to do something about it, John comments that's her decision to make, which kind of ties into what you were saying, Stephen, with, is that something that John believes it's her decision to make, or he's just saying that to keep walking and get in to go see what he needs to get done? Because he's a soldier, is what he's been trained to do, but I don't think John's like, yeah, whatever, she wants to burn people, it's her decision to make. Because there's one thing to talk about it, but what we see at the end of the episode is very different when you're actually living it. I had, the idea is horrible, but the reality of it is unfathomable. Steven, did you have something on that?
I actually remembered what I was going to say from before, and that was John's decision making, or when you talked about lack of decision making. And I feel like in not making a decision, he is making a decision. I am one of those, if you choose not to choose, that is a choice. And I think in this case, he is choosing not to choose. He's choosing the easy way, and that's not to have to take a stand. And I find that hard to believe or understand coming from him. I mean, we talk a lot about how Daenerys' character in this episode, a lot of people believed that it was a quick flip. I don't understand how John doesn't speak out against what every person should see as a moral atrocity. It seems like something that he would do, and he would do regardless of whether it was his life at stake or what. He's not fighting for the land of the living anymore. He doesn't need to save the world. He's now only fighting for his queen. And you're telling me that he's going to be more reticent not talking back to his queen than he was talking back to the people for the land of the living?
Does everyone have a comment about John? Otherwise, I was going to keep going on towards the Varys being burned on the beach. Okay, I'll let you all go first. Damn it.
God, you kind of derailed me there. Steven, I was gonna pipe in and say that I wondered a little bit if John is pulling something that I tend to do when people are like, "Well, what do you want?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's fine, whatever everybody wants," because I kind of assume everyone is gonna make the same logical things that I would, because obviously whatever I think is already the most logical, and everyone would choose that. I've done that many times in my life where I'm like, "Oh, it'll be fine, we'll figure it out." Be- reality people choose wildly different things for very different logical reasons. But also he's kind of committed himself to this path, so he's trying to like tell himself it's gonna be okay. But is it?
Is it?
I guess as we're talking about, sorry, are you?
Oh no, you're fine. It's just the last thing I was gonna say is just also that you do make the point, Stephen, that John didn't really like Tyrion was sat there arguing with Daenerys about, we can't just, you don't want to, the point is not to destroy the people of King's Landing. Like, where was John during these? Like, why wasn't he arguing? He is one for doing that kind of stuff. Go ahead, Gary.
I guess both with John and Dany and Tyrion, like I think I've made the point before. Like, could some of these parts of these episodes been dragged into making this a 2-part episode before the attack and the day of the attack, similar to what they did with the Long Night? They did an entire talky episode of like, let's prepare, and then another episode. And could this have been felt a little more drastic in both Jon being very much just a follower, and giving him some depth, the same with Tyrion, the same with Daenerys, anyway, that's just my general questions. Do you think that this episode could have been extended a little bit, Tyler?
In Gary's professional words, could this have been a talkie talk episode and a stabby stab episode next? Sorry, Tyler.
No,
Where's the big word sign for that?
I was gonna say, Gary, your point basically is kind of what we've been echoing for the past 2 seasons. Is everything is just so rushed to the end here that characters like Jon, which was what I was going to mention here, they basically get completely destroyed of what they were as an actual fleshed out character. They now become this one note, as it's so famously memed on the internet. Jon's lines literally become this season, "You're my queen and I don't want it." I mean, he says more stuff throughout it or whatever, but
Does he though?
not really. But yeah, like, sure, Jon from seasons 1 through 4 may have actually done something or said something to this Daenerys, or even 5 and 6 too, but Jon from 7 and 8 is not the same Jon Snow from the earlier seasons.
Fair enough.
Okay. Enough about Jon Snow. Mediocre beeline character,
Best
anyways.
character ever.
I have a comment on Alistair Thorne.
No.
Don't
The
push
Hero
me-
of the
don't push me there,
Revolution
sir.
is the best character ever.
Don't push
Back
me.
to you, Nick.
Oh,
He
God.
lost the battle to who?
Ooh.
Oof.
To
Rude.
Sansa Stark.
He got his face
Beyond,
punched in
even
by
worse.
who?
You know, that's a really good point. Like, they keep on saying Jon won the Battle of Bastards, but let's just be honest. Like, Jon was losing that thing.
Ooh.
Don't be throwing shade on my boy
Sansa-
1-1.
Sansa won that battle, and Sansa finally murdered him. Like,
After
Jon
Jon
Snow is a
Jon Snow
background
wouldn't even
character in
gotten-
that story.
After Jon punched
Jon
a
Snow
hole
would
in
have
his
gotten through the
face.
front door had 1-1 not smashed the door down.
Anyways,
Okay.
Nick.
Anyway,
When
back to you, Nick.
Tyrion goes into Dany's quarters to charge Varys with treason, or to say that he was the one who betrayed it, he's framed against the backdrop of the dragon head carving on the wall, and for a frame or two, it looks like he's entering into the belly of the beast to talk to Dany. Foreshadowing. There's several memes that highlight. This is the one about the unkempt one, Gary, that you had. There's several memes on the internet that highlight how Dany's hair has become more and more intricately braided and put together as the seasons progress with each battle she's won. As the seasons go on. However, in this scene in particular, I also noted, not trying to downplay any feminine hygiene, but after Missandei's death, pretty much her murder, Dany looks completely disheveled. Her hair is unkempt. She looks very pale ahead as well, and she has multiple little flyaways in the zoom-up close-up of her face, and she doesn't look very regal. She looks broken. Gary.
Conspiracy theory number 3. She needed her hand to put together her hair and makeup. That's how he was helping. Going back to a previous very silly point about fashion. Because Missandei probably did her hair before that. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, she was her handmaiden, yes.
Yeah.
Or her translator. I'm a little confused onto that, but I mean, she clearly has other handmaidens, or she does a great job of braiding her own hair because she shows up for the execution perfectly.
True.
I can
She
barely do
probably
one
had
braid in my hair.
Missandei to translate to her other handmaidens, and now without Missandei there, she's like, I don't even know how to talk to these people. Whatever.
On the beachhead, before Varys is executed, Varys seemingly accepts his fate. And again, throwback to Melisandre, not Missandei, Melisandre, who had famously quoted, "It is always their fate to die in this wretched country, as it was hers." So there's no way Varys was going to get out of this season alive. We knew that going in.
Ooh.
At the end of that little interchange, as Varys is burning, Jon is seen visibly staring at Dany as he starts to question her temperament a little bit as well. I had several notes in this episode in particular, where I think people are very scared of Dany. People see the danger that she possesses, but nobody seems to think that the outcome of this episode is plausible. They're worried she may make the wrong choice. They're worried that it's something that could happen, but only Varys was the one who saw it as an actuality and wanted to do something about it, was my takeaway. Everybody else is like, oh, she could, but I don't know. I think she'll make the right choice. I think
Sure,
she
Adolf.
could. No, she'll make the right choice. But nobody seems to intercede as like, this could happen. If it did, it would be devastating.
Sure, Adolf has a nuke, but will he really use it?
Right. I mean, like you mentioned, Stephen, there's a lot of political unrest with some of these things that are currently happening. It's like the deterrent is the hope. And I have a line towards the end of the episode about hope and characters and the human status, and it gets very existential, and I apologize in advance.
Is Varys the
Although-
only person who got to see the descent of the Mad King into madness?
So
No,
also, yeah,
Jaime.
other people did, but Varys also has that line
Well,
that he's
did you
seen
say
more
Stephen?
kings and
Sorry.
queens than any other man alive.
Jaime was
Jaime's
there.
not in this conversation. Jaime's
No,
not
but he-
an advisor.
No,
Oh,
but he
for
was.
Danny?
No, but he was there, and
Danny.
you're saying, did anyone else witness his descent into madness? And
None of her advisors other than Varys
Or
had
all right,
seen.
all right. Name her advisors. How about that?
No
There's
one
Jon,
currently
Missandei, Grey
advising-
Worm,
Lysandre's dead. She's not there.
You're talking
from the
about two different
grave.
things. You're both right. You're both right.
and Varys.
You can both go to prom,
And-
but you're arguing the same thing.
Yes. Anyway,
Anyways,
That's-
is it? Amanda.
I made a note in this episode, even though we've seen her use this before, that the interesting fact that she uses the dragon as her executioner. We've seen her do that before and everything, but it wasn't until then that I was thinking, like, why does she do that? You know, we've seen that some of the families have many of the noble families have headsmen for this. The Starks believe in swinging the sword themselves. I don't recall hearing any of the other Targaryens using a dragon as that. Like, in fact, I specifically remember in the Dance of Dragons, like one the time they did, and it was considered much more of a shocking thing. But it is interesting to think about the fact that we spent several seasons with Dany as she was hoping or trying to get her dragons, waiting for them to get big enough for them to use, and everyone on her side was wanting the same, like waiting for them to get big enough so that the dragons can help her. And now that they are, she uses them for everything.
they're a Swiss Army knife of ruling. I also, I guess, on a rewatch, I kind of sort of forgot the dragon was there. I was expecting Jon to be the one to behead him, like, because that would have been a Jon Snow thing to do, is be the one who has to pass the sentence.
So Drogon is like the most cooperative, just reads her mind and does whatever the heck she wants without barely getting any direction. I admire that. How does she do that, considering we've seen that it was not always existent like that?
There's an app for that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Nick, unless you're
There's a
gonna,
movie series.
or I was gonna say, are you gonna move on from this point? Because I want to.
No.
Okay.
He wants to rebut us.
Never. Oh, he does. Yes, probably. I was gonna say there's a movie out called How to Train Your Dragon, Gary. That's where she found it.
Oh, you're right.
Ooh.
Ooh.
It's a decent movie.
It's
I
a
got
good
chills.
movie. It's good music.
I think that it was really quick. Not moving on from this point. Is your thing quick, Stephen? 'Cause
Yes,
I have
it
a
is.
question for the group. Then go ahead. I'll go to 2.
I don't understand why you're saying that the dragon changed personality going into the final season, and I don't see it as strange that it was not only the human characters who were simplified into a single artifact going into this final season. So was Drogon just changed into the Wrath of Daenerys.
That's his tagline,
I
right?
think
It is now.
Drogon, the Wrath of Daenerys.
I think between all 3 dragons she originated with, Drogon has always been the one that's kind of at her side, the most
No.
snarly, the most.
He ran away.
Well, it's like in one 2 episodes or three
Which
seasons,
was
3
like, it
episodes,
was
3
made out to
episodes
be like a couple
of 8.
months or
Yeah.
so.
She couldn't control them. She locked up the other two. He ate a child. I mean, maybe it was his rebellious
just
teenager
ate
phase. I don't know.
I know that in my rebellious
Barbecue.
teenager phase, I ate children too. So hey, yeah, there's that.
When he's bigger, I was thinking in my head, like when she passes off one of the dragons and sells them to I forget his name, but the first guy who, when she acquires the Unsullied, she has Drogon there, and Drogon's the one that she says to Dracarys first to. And then also when she's talking to the 3 heads of the Brotherhood fighters, when she eventually finds her boyfriend who changed actors through the different seasons.
Oh
Over
yeah.
in the Slaver's Bay.
Dario.
Drogon's the one who's there. Dario Naharis. Drogon's there, who's like snarling at them. Like she's the one. It just seems to me like he's the one who's prominently been by her side. Not always, but one of the first ones to mature that she seems to take a shining to.
He was like his favorite, but like he was. She
Seems
was.
like the
It
one
was
that she
very
always
much
rode,
in
too.
evidence that like she didn't know how the previous Targaryens controlled the dragons. I just find it
Right.
very impressive that Drogon suddenly has advanced to the point of like, hey, I know how to even time my move out of the shadows in a way that will make my mom look super impressive.
He's Mother of Dragons. I was just thinking that same thing when you said make my mother look impressive. So maybe there's some sort of unwritten sense between the two. I don't know. I'm not saying it's there. I'm not saying it's great.
I
It
now
was-
have the
it was
I now have the
expedited.
unimpeded fear that Amanda's going to have this psychological bond with Ari, and at one point is going to say, "I don't like what you did, Steven," and Ari's going to just appear out of the darkness with like a shiv.
Happens.
I
Happens.
would never want that.
Uh huh.
Man, I felt that
Sorry,
danger
Dave.
from over
I
here.
can't do that.
Yeah.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger. The call's coming from inside the house. Right. The point I was gonna say. Oh crap! I lost it. I had something else about. I had a question for the group on that question. Gary, you said she maybe would have had John do the beheading because that's a John thing to do. I think that is his character's honor bound thing, but I don't think that's what he would have done. Like if Danny had been like, "I sentence you to die, John, bring me his head." I think he would have stared at her, and that might have been a really awkward, tense moment because he might have said no, even if Danny is my queen, as he said earlier that I highlighted. I don't know if he would have killed Varys for seemingly slighting her, but maybe not something that would have warranted death because he's known Lord Varys for a while too. And Danny being honor bound, I don't know if he would. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you think if she had asked him to, he would have?
So 3 things on this. First of all, yes, he would have because he is a serf at this point in time and has no free will. 2, would his previous character have? No. His previous character would have gone, I'm your consort, not your headsman, or some clever quip like that and not do it. Third thing though, I can't get around how he doesn't see this as Daenerys' job to do it and how he doesn't lose respect because he's always said that if you kill a man, you should do it by your own hands. If you sentence someone to death, she's taking an easy way. She's not taking a dagger or a sword. She's just, all right, yeah, I'm gonna kill you. Loose the dogs. So in that regard, she's no better than the hero of the revolution.
I will argue
Don't
that
drag
he
her
would not
down
have.
to the level of the hero of the revolution.
I will argue against it, Stephen, purely because we've actually seen John in the situation before where he was told to kill someone and did not. And he did not execute Ygritte. And in that case, he was told to by someone that he highly respected, Corrin Halfhand, and he knew in extremely well what the consequences were going to be. He was quite clear that it was literally like life or death at this point. And he did not. In this case, for much less shady, much less clear reasons, I don't think he would have just done. And also, Danny has told him to do things before. Like she told him not to tell his sister, and he did anyway. He is yes, he is supposed to be loyal to her. However, he's not a perfect servant by any means, and he will exercise his own free will and judgment. Go ahead, whoever won that one. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, you.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'm all the way to Surf. I think he would have grabbed the sword in a bit of tense scene of like him thinking about it, but not actually like raising it, and then finally saying no. I did also have a quick comment too that the dragon, like you'd mentioned, she doesn't grab a dagger, she doesn't do like a sword or actually put any effort into it, Stephen. I think there's also something there that's unclean about it. Like when we see Eddard Stark in the very like second scene of the very first episode do it, it's a clean death even for a deserter, someone who's perceivably like a big terrible thing. Someone is given a clean death, a soldier's death with a sword slice across the neck. It's not like they're firing squad type thing with a bunch of crossbows. The fact that it's a dragon burning them alive, they're probably alive for a moment there. So it's more torment and torture than a clean soldier's death too. So John probably doesn't see that sit well with him. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I gotta agree and disagree with you. I entirely agree that it's a much more unclean death, and burning someone alive, regardless of how short they're alive for, is the worst way to go. Everyone says it's banned by basically everything. So it's very much unclean, and it's her modus vivendi. It's her way of getting around doing things. But I will say, I think you guys are. This feels bad saying it. You guys are conflating the Jon of previous episodes or seasons with the Jon of today. And I think the Jon of previous seasons definitely does stand up to Daenerys. Jon, when he told his sister about the stuff, didn't stand up to Daenerys. Did he go back to Daenerys and go, "Hey, I told my sisters, I know you shouldn't have said, but my honor bound me to come back and tell you"? No, he just, he was a little sulky little puppy and didn't even say a word to Daenerys. I agree with what Tyler said earlier. They have simplified him into I don't know. I don't know if they're trying to make him like the virtuous hero that everyone needs. And the only way to keep him virtuous is to have him never say anything or make any decisions or do anything that meaningful. But that's what he ends up becoming. Nick.
Excuse me. Especially with this episode, I dislike the writing. I don't like how characters are written. That said, I'm also not a strong proponent of saying everything is because of poor writing for characters of the story. So I'm behind that and I get it, but at the same time, I don't know. I just feel like it warrants defending too that he's not the same character as he was earlier seasons. Nothing's the same as it ever was. Trying not to be too existential, but that's kind of who I am. You step in a river, you step in the same river, it's not the same river, nor are you the same person. Yada, yada, yada. So it's like, of course it's not the same because he's not the person who hadn't gone through all the literal shit to get him to season 8. In season 1, he was a completely different, naive person. No, Gary, you especially may not move forward. I think that there is a discrepancy, obviously, in how we're receiving him because it is different and there is this rush to the end. But I think that while he may have done it, he may not have. It's just a devil's advocate kind of question. I think that he's not as resigned to follow as he may lead himself to believe. I think he's resigned to be the soldier he needs his queen needs him to be, and he's willing to do that. But I think in a moment of trial, he may waver some, which we do see towards the end. His queen charges into the battle, and he tells his troops to retreat.
Yeah, you just it's the guard at the camp that your leader just needs you to be. All you have to do is just be that guard and not have to think about the consequences.
Some of the worst things in history have been done by people just following orders. Does that make them good soldiers?
No, it doesn't.
That's As with most things in life, it's for future generations to decide.
Mm-hmm.
Things that weren't war crimes after the Nuremberg trials were explicitly stated as thus. Very similar to this episode, things and atrocities that are unfathomable become clearly wrong when seen in reality.
I hesitate to say that just because you haven't seen an atrocity happen in person doesn't mean that the atrocity isn't atrocious. You should have the moral
Absolutely.
fortitude and the ethical fiber to be able to make that decision before it happens. So no, I'm not with you there.
Absolutely. I would hope that more people are like Varys, regardless of the consequences, willing to stand up and do the right thing, rather than the Johns in this episode. Again, whether fully behind the comment or just as a throwaway line, saying things like that's her decision to make. Right?
You know who we haven't heard anything from? The guy who John is his favorite character, Mr. Tyler Schatz. I want to know what his opinion on this is.
You keep
He
saying my
hates him.
last
He'd
name
rather
wrong.
bring back Alistair.
I do?
Yeah, it's not an A sound. It's an
It's
AU.
Is it Shits?
It's actually Eloise. It's actually Eloise.
Wait, okay, but how do you pronounce it? I didn't know. I didn't know I was
Shots.
pronouncing it wrong.
Like you go to the bar to take a drink.
Shots? Really?
Yes.
Shots.
How did Steven pronounce it?
With
Shats.
an A sound.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I probably fuck it up 50% of the time. So I'll probably forget this by tomorrow too. So
I've lost track of even where we were in this discussion here with what what is going on, because I think you are reading into too much of a comment here of Varys's point. I think is Dany is going to attack and destroy attack King's Landing here, and Jon is like, well, that is her decision to make. That is not
Correct.
Jon's decision. This is not Jon's army. Jon is there. He pledged himself to Daenerys and everything. But it's not Jon's place to swing the sword there and take off Varys's head. Even if Dany wanted, he'd be like, no, this isn't mine. This is yours. Steven's slowly dying over there.
Sorry.
That's what we were discussing. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, my problem is this just comes from the fact that every character is just kind of slowly condensed down into this singular shining point. Like I think Steven, you hit it like kind of on the head of like Jon is now being pushed into the I am the hero who does nothing wrong here, and I mean like he is being pushed into the hero who does nothing wrong here because he follows.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Elaborate.
So he follows.
Hero who does nothing wrong means what?
So this is jumping ahead into the sacking of King's Landing here by Daenerys here. When Jon is on the streets, Jon hesitates and does not command his soldiers to strike down the Lannisters who have surrendered. Grey Worm chucks the first spear there, basically kicking off the bloodshed and everything like that. And Jon commands his army to not attack. Obviously, it doesn't work because even in battle, I think it's like everyone has a plan in battle until you get punched in the face, and then plans go out the window there. So Jon is then slowly seen walking through the streets, basically just defending himself from anyone who attacks, and then he sees people like his own men. He kills his own men because they're trying to rape that woman there in the streets there. So he kills that guy, and then he tries to gather everyone and get out of the city as best he can. So Jon is the wrong thing to do in that situation would be to join Grey Worm in the fight and slaughter all of these defenseless Lannister, well, not defenseless, but these Lannister soldiers who have given up.
You're saying the hero who does nothing wrong, as in opposed to Jon jumping into the bloodshed, is what he should have done?
What?
You called him the hero who does nothing wrong, or he's being reduced to the hero who does nothing wrong, and then described his actions.
Yeah.
If he had different actions, he wouldn't be the hero who does nothing wrong. So what he did was right.
So you're asking is
I'm curious what your framework is underlining in your comment.
well, again, to just show this out to the audience here, in our worldview of this action here, joining in the battle of the sacking of King's Landing when everyone has already surrendered is the wrong thing to do. Jon is trying to hold his army back and not try and participate in the battle and trying to get everyone out of the city there. So that is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Him doing something.
I wouldn't.
Him doing the wrong
Sorry,
thing
go.
would be joining in the combat and slaying the defenseless people. So his character trait now has become he is this perfect is not the right word, but this basically this person who does not do the bad thing. He is the shining hero that everyone aspires to be here when really he was more complex than that in the earlier seasons. Like we discussed, Theon had always said, Jon, you always seem to do the right things. Jon's like, no, I don't. I just do what is best at the time. It may look like that in hindsight, but
Would I add he does the morally right thing?
probably. Yeah.
I wouldn't call that the hero who does nothing wrong. That seems too facetious to me. I would say that's the hero, the person who does the right moral thing.
Sure.
In which case, yeah, I agree with it. I don't know if Jon has been more complex. We've probably seen him in more complex situations. But your situations shouldn't define who you are as a person.
So
Quite famously, Jon knows nothing. I don't know if that's
Sure.
the definition of someone who's complex.
No, I disagree with that because Jon has always been complex in regards to he had one goal in his world, and that was to save the land of the living from the armies of the dead. That was his entire shtick for like tons and tons and tons and tons of seasons. And he was complex behind how he did that. He would disobey orders, he would obey orders, he would disobey enemy orders, he would obey enemy orders. He would basically whatever it takes to get that goal taken care of is what he would do. And then you get into this situation where he loses that overriding goal that Night King is devanquished. He has no more point, and now he's just a yes man. He has no complexity. He has no you're not making any more complex decisions. It's the most complex decision he has to make is, do I say no to committing, murder most foul, or do I just commit murder most foul? And I don't know.
I can get behind he's the least complex, acknowledging he has some complexity, but this show has people like Littlefinger and Varys in it. To say he's complex, he's not even on the register scale for how complex some of these characters try to weave their plots. To me, again, I don't want to say my opinions are how the show is. That's overbearing and an overgeneralization. To me, he's not very complex. And he does, you're quite right, he does obey orders, disobey orders, and do several other things along the way, but rarely at the same time. It's like, we got to go to the north and get the other wildlings to help us. So they trudge to the north. It's not like he's doing that while he's also trying to have three other things work out. I don't see him as multiple things at the same time. I can get behind. I think you're absolutely right that he loses his main directive of saving the land of the living. Because even when Cersei was the threat and they met at the pit, the Dragon Pit, he still didn't care about Cersei. He wanted to focus on getting rid of the Night King. So once he loses that main threat, he does seem a bit listless. But I don't know if that makes him one-dimensional. He's always been a soldier. Even in the Stark family, he's the one who, like you said, does just kind of become the yes man. So I don't see it as a lessening of his character. I see it as his arc against the Night King has taken a subplot to Dany's arc. He's not less interesting. It's not his main story.
So, Tyler, what Nick is saying that Jon has always been this boring. He's always been a yes man, and he's always been a no-brained,
Steven hating on my man Jon Snow here.
No.
If I fight dragons
I'm trying to start a fight.
If I fight dragons and I fight the Night King, that doesn't mean I'm interesting. It means my life is chaos. My life is complex and intricate and detailed. That doesn't mean that I'm complex. Okay, scenario. Is Littlefinger a complex character?
Nope, he's dead.
It's fair. Corpse
True.
can't be complex.
Is Littlefinger as complex as Jon Snow when they were both living?
Littlefinger's complexity goes in a pyramid from the beginning of the first episode to his end at Winterfell. He is incredibly complex, and he is narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, and by the end, he is boring.
So, okay, I'll take the point in there that I wanted to hear. Is Littlefinger's situation complex because he made it so? Or like in Jon's case, did Jon make himself complex, or was the complexity thrust upon him because of where he was? Again, ultimately, do our situations make us complex or the hero, as the initial conversation started out with Tyler's comment? Or are we heroes because we choose to be in some situations
I
over
think
others?
being born the bastard of one of the great lords of the north, the great lord of the north, to a mother who hates you, siblings who sort of respect you, another brother who is a bastard, not a bastard, who is a stolen prince of the Iron Isles, and your uncle Benjen also is ranging north, is a pretty complex situation to be born into.
So the situation is complex to be born into. Thus, Jon is not complex. The situation is complex, as you just said.
That
That's my
doesn't
point.
mean.
I just said what you said.
I think both can happen.
Yeah, we're also very,
I'm fine.
very, very far
Off.
off into something totally not at all relevant to the episode. So, do you have any more to kind of push us back on track, Nick?
That was on the end of the beachhead there. If nobody else has anything about Varys, the next little bit I had was on Grey Worm and Dany in her chambers. Want me to go on?
Are you going to
Grey
recite
Worm.
the entire episode to us, or?
Like I said, I had really interesting I found really interesting beats in this whole episode, and I tried not to take notes, but everything was something I wanted to comment on. Grey Worm chucks Missandei's slave collar into the fire as it causes him too much pain to look at. Very similar to how he could not physically watch her die. He had to turn away when she was killed on the tower. Thought that was interesting. And then, yeah, Dany says, I don't have love here. All I have is fear. And she says, let it be fear. I think that's the beginning of her strongly diving into what the end of this episode shows. And apparently people have comments on that.
So I had a question about that point here. Maybe it's just more of a kind of digging into her comment a little bit more. She doesn't have love in this place because she is not of this place, similar to Jon. If you want to compare Jon to Daenerys, Jon was born in born in West. Well, okay. Jon grew up in in Westeros. There, Daenerys did not. So Jon has all of the history and everything that is known to the people of the land. Daenerys is now this, as Cersei so eloquently put it, basically this incoming conqueror to Westeros. So of course she's not going to have love. So I wonder if a lot of this problem for Daenerys comes from, this was stuff said I think way back in the earlier seasons, that there was always this secretly, the common folk were out there secretly wishing for a Targaryen rise to come back here into power and everything like that. And when she came across the narrow seas, the people would just celebrate her being there and everything like that. But I mean, is that part of her problem then? Like, it seems like some of her problem that she doesn't feel she has love here, well, because you're not from here really. You have been on this side of the world for, again, the show is terrible about the passage of time. Let's say 3 months now, maybe more, maybe less than that. So where do you expect this love from people to come from all of a sudden here? Just because you showed up? No. Steven.
I'm going to harken back to, well, okay, first of all, I want to make my point. My point was going to be that I also think this is a play on Machiavelli. Is it better to be loved or feared? And she chooses fear, and that's the archetype of, oh, she's turning bad. And I think that's a simplistic way to look about Machiavelli. But anyways, on to Tyler's point. I want to harken back to what I said last episode, and that is, Daenerys has no friends, and Daenerys, everyone sees her as a god that's around her. She has no friends. She has no close people. Even when he's talking about like Grey Worm, I don't think Grey Worm's her friend. Grey Worm is there. I mean, and is again praises her, but yeah, it's hard to be loved by anyone if you don't have any friends. And I think that she thinks that, I'm not sure what it would take for her to think that she is loved. If she just needs like a good best buddy, rom-com situation, or traveling, I don't know, friendship, something or another, or if she, honest to God, needs another Misa moment, which everyone was so cool about when she freed the slaves in Astapor, was it? And everyone going, "Oh, we love you so much. We love you so much." It's, what does she need to feel loved? Because she is not friendly. She makes herself remote. She makes herself unable to have friends. If she thinks that the only way to be loved is for everyone to praise her like a god, not just praise her like a god, worship her like a god, and do all the, I'm doing a bowing motion right now for everyone that can't see me. She's setting herself up for this. Like, she makes it sound like she is some victim here, and she is not a victim. These are choices she made. Gary.
I think I mentioned in the last episode about how Jon said he can't lie to his family, but he has to tell the truth to his family, so he tells the truth to the Starks, but yet at that point doesn't consider Dany to be family. But in this episode, I guess I read that scene a little differently than everyone else, which is that I read it as Dany trying to take a pass at Jon romantically, and Jon stopping that because deep down Jon acknowledges that they are related. They are family, and that decision clicks in her mind of like, oh, so you're not fully accepted that you've started to accept the identity that you are a Targaryen, that you have a father, you have a legitimate father and a legitimate mother, which I previously said I was getting sick of talking about fucking Jon. Sorry. But maybe that's important to Jon to know that he had a legitimate father and a legitimate mother. So that's important to him. But yes, I don't think it was necessarily about love. It was just about how like she still feels like she's has no friends, and Jon, the one person she thought could help her through and be her companion on this journey, turned her down. And is just, all he wants to do is be a soldier, I think you said previously. So that is all I will say, because I'm done talking about Jon Snow. To Nick.
I want to go back to Gary's comment about Jon Snow. I think that that's also very accurate. I think that for the earlier seasons, all he wanted to know was who his lineage was. And so now that he does know, he doesn't want to bring it up because he does want to be a good soldier and be subservient to Dany. He says several times, because he's true to his word, you are my queen, she's my queen, as we've mentioned. But I think that knowledge and that lineage is something that he's now taken as a personal truth, and that they're related is why he can't go on loving her the way that he wants to. He tries, like the kisses definitely seems consensual, but he's the one who stops it, and that's why she says, yeah, so let it be fair. Have anything else about Jon Snow there, Gary?
Worst character in this episode. I have a comment later about people who could have been removed. Removed from that. People who could have been removed from this episode and made absolutely no difference. I actually, as we've talked about
really-
Jon Snow for 20 minutes, I feel like you
Apparently,
could remove
Gary's
Jon
been
Snow
booted
from this
from the party.
episode.
I agree with that too, Gary. You probably could have taken Jon Snow out of this episode and still had somewhat the same effect.
Yeah,
Yep.
probably.
But that is also because of the
And-
character assassination that has happened to him. But
Yeah, they didn't do much with him in this one. And Jon Snow is a personal favorite of mine as well. But yeah, you're right. He honestly wasn't much for one other than window dressing.
Can we? I would say, can we say that there's two parts of this episode? There is, excuse me again. There is the first half, the first 45 minutes, which is an actual TV show, and the second 45 minutes, which is a on-screen. How can we make you feel as bad as you can about everything happening?
Mm.
I have one last note for the first half of the episode before moving on. And that is, obviously, I'm an idiot about Valyrian, but Danny calls Grey Worm
Nudo.
Orgo Nudho. And is that Grey Worm in Valyrian?
Valyrian.
Orgo.
Yes.
Orgo Nudho.
Nudo.
The
I'm
butchering
so
of
glad
how
we said
Gary
this.
pronounced that aside, yes, that is how you say Grey Worm in Valyrian. High Valyrian.
so that
Pronounce it yourself, please. Use it in a sentence.
I didn't write it down. I can get to it.
question here then, is it actually Grey Worm in Valyrian, or is it what Grey Worm's actual name was before he became Grey Worm?
He
I don't
chose
think
the
I
name
don't-
Grey Worm. When she freed the slaves, she had them all choose their names. Grey Worm chose it as that day he had drawn the name Grey Worm, and it was a lucky day because it was the day he was freed.
I thought that was his
Yes.
name though he had. He kept it though because that was the name he had when he was freed by Daenerys. But he had a name before he became an Unsullied.
He did. It was a different one.
okay.
The masters give them the names like Grey Worm, Red Rat, anything to remind them that they're vermin.
Yeah. 'Cause
And
I thought
in the
I
books-
remember I thought I remember in the books he had a name and then obviously became
Oh.
Grey Worm because the masters gave him that, and that's the name he chose to then keep because that's the name he had when Daenerys freed him.
Yeah, and the book mentions that, I don't think the show does, but in the books they mention that the Unsullied would draw new names every single day, because I thought that just sounded utterly exhausting. How are you ever going to remember that? And so that day was the name that he had drawn. He had actually drawn the name Grey Worm. So they all are a Grey Worm, possibly. They possibly all had chosen that name.
According to the mainstream media and Google, it says Torgo Nudo is the Valyrian word for Grey Worm. It says season 3, episode 5, Kissed by Fire. Grey Worm claims he has no memory of his life before being sold and trained as an Unsullied, thus he cannot remember his real name. Torgo Nudo, Grey Worm, is the name he identifies himself with because that's the name he has when he is freed by Daenerys.
Okay.
Nick over here being smart enough to realize we live in the century with Google, instant answers.
We have the technology.
Or
We can
also,
do better.
I know that you can't trust the internet, so it could just
Gary,
be made up crap.
What
somebody
you
had.
choose to surf on the internet is not the reason you cannot trust the internet.
Fair enough. Okay, but so has that been referenced before? Because previously, Valyrian, I've been like, oh yeah, Tolar Magaris. That's all men must serve, all men must die. I was like, I didn't freaking know that. Like, and I've been actually paying attention to this show. Like, let alone if last time you heard it was 2 years ago.
Father
should have a
Margulis has been
section
said many times compared to Torgo Nudo on this show.
Are
We
there
should
any
have-
other Valyrian words we could have Gary try to butcher the
No, that's what I
pronunciation
was
for
going to
us
say. We
quick?
should have, real quick, we should have a
Eric.
section of this show. We should have a section of this show entitled "Barry Speaks Words."
I'm gonna look some up and just
Uh,
message them to
Gary,
you, and I want
there's-
you to pronounce them.
Harry, there's another Valyrian word that's said kind of off and on in this show. It's Dracarys. It's kind of important. I want to remember that one too.
Nick, you're a hat of asses. You're a hat of asses. Continue on.
Your anger feeds me.
To be on the same side as Gary. Not to agree with him, but to be on the same side
Oh.
as Gary.
Don't go down in that sludge. Don't go in that sludge.
I will say too, I did not at all remember that is what his Valyrian name was. at all until you guys started talking about it. I was like, okay, maybe it was said in an earlier episode.
I feel like they say it more in the books. That's why I was aware, but you read the books too,
Missandei
so.
calls him that too.
Oh, yeah,
Missandei
you're
has
right.
an
She
intimate
does.
moment. I think she calls him that too, because that's his name, and they're speaking Valyrian.
Oh, Nick. Varys is actually Spider in Valyrian.
Really?
Maybe not. Maybe I'm just reading crap on the internet. It could be.
There's that.
I like how you
Nope,
announced
that's
it
just
as if you
crap.
found
Never
out,
mind.
like the Holy Grail. I
Nope,
like how you announced it
never
as if
mind.
you found the Holy Grail.
I read things too fast on the internet, and turns out it was clickbait.
I feel like that's a long list of people who usually do that. Read something quick on the internet and then try and dunk on me with a play school net, thinking you get it all shit.
Okay. Anyways,
Anyway,
Nick,
That
did
was
you
great.
have more points to continue on with, or do we want to throw it over to
Oh
somebody
my
else?
goodness. Does anybody have anything else with Dany on the throne, spouting the hate before her battle, talking to Tyrion and Torgo Nudo? Okay, let's go through those then quick, because I got something else before we jump into the second half of the episode. Steven. Or no, Tyler. Right.
So
That guy.
I like the phrase "mercy is our strength." As Dany, it seems like Dany's trying to placate Tyrion one last time, of like, we're not going to destroy the city yet. But then also too, I want to call out here too that Tyrion has all of a sudden decided that the bells ringing will signal that the city is surrendered. When in the flying fuck has that ever signaled the city's surrendering? It seems like they just choose what the hell the bells are going to mean all of a sudden, because Davos clearly states at the Battle of Blackwater there that the bells do not mean anything good, really. The bells never meant anything good, I think.
I thought that when the people wanted the Mad King to surrender, they rang the bells. I thought there was something with like that wasn't actually maybe a sign of surrender. Okay. Amanda then.
I did wonder that too, because I feel like in previous ones we've heard there's been a couple mentions about the bells or something. I feel like even Davos said something about the bells when he's like, I've never known them to mean surrender or something. But I did find that mention of mercy from Dany interesting, because she also made a comment about, I didn't write down exactly what she said, but she was twisting mercy into the idea of not just helping King's Landing, but like freeing the future generations. And I think she was twisting it into a dark idea of, you're helping the future generations by just sacrificing this one. That's an interesting idea of mercy. I will show them mercy by killing them. Well, that was Joffrey's idea of mercy as well. We saw his idea in the first season.
We will be merciful to future generations who will not have to live within a tyrant's grip.
Nice.
Nick, I think you took too many notes.
I told you before we started recording, I took too many notes.
I did not take that as many notes this time, and I mentioned John once in my notes, so I am impressed how long we went off on our little tangent there.
I
You
realized it
mentioned John
in
more
correction. I
times?
thought I only mentioned John once. I mentioned him twice. Once that he like tried to make out with Dany, and the second time that he stopped someone from being raped. Nick went on for, I don't know, he probably had like 10 points on John.
I guess I'm just trying to live up to how often you talk about John, Gary. I didn't realize that he was your favorite character.
Conspiracy theory number 4, John is actually Gary's secret favorite character.
Write it on your board. That's what I can get behind.
Okay, we're up to number 4. Continuing on to talk about anything else.
I am
want the
referring to
shirt
that. Yeah,
want
I
the
am
shirt
referring to
idea.
John as that from now on. When we talk about it, it'll be.
Gary's favorite character.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's
like,
Steven's favorite character is Daenerys, and Gary's secret favorite character is John.
Anyway,
like the shirt that says the big words. It's like my favorite character, and it says like little tiny words is John, and then it says a picture of Bolton at the bottom, Ramsey. So like if you actually read it, my favorite character is John. Yes.
Anyway, anything else before we get into burning and fire and battles? Nick?
Tyrion running around trying to make it very clear, repeating it to everyone. Hey, the bells mean they've surrendered. The bells mean, the fact that he is telling everyone this tells me already that they weren't clear already on the fact that the bells mean people surrender.
Because everyone wants everyone to die.
I got to imagine that the bells have some significance of meaning surrender, because Tyrion would know the history of the Seven Kingdoms and know that that is a sign for the bells meaning surrender. And if you guys are telling me the books don't mention crap about this, I guess maybe
The books aren't
the
out
showrunners
this far yet. Oh, or do you mean in
took
general?
In general, maybe the show took some artistic liberties with the assumption of telling the audience that when you hear the bells, that's the assumption that the city guard is surrendering.
I was told when the bells ring, Quasimodo comes out and helps some gypsy girl on the ground to save off the
Esmeralda.
yeah, whatever her name is.
I'm booing your reference, but I actually know what you're talking about.
Harry, did you just throw out an actual historical reference? Harry.
It's from a Disney movie.
It's Quasimodo.
Which is based on an actual book.
It's based on a book.
It's like,
let's be clear. I don't know fucking books. I know something that was based on a Disney movie.
I seriously want to
people giving me
out of context
far too much credit. Like, oh, Gary, that's actually really nice. That's, you know, books. I was like, no, I know a Disney movie that came out in the 90s. That's it.
I want the out of context clips from this.
Moreover, I know a Disney movie that has lost its copyright and it's in the public domain. So the book is in the public domain, thus it's a Disney movie.
My goodness.
Okay, well, Gary, we tried to give you credit for being wise on your history, but you denied us.
I refuse to take credit for books.
You refuse to take.
Yep, I'm ready to jump into fire and death.
Nick, do you want to start on fire and death, or you've been running most of the?
I had.
Oh, we're gonna hold you up there, Nick. We're gonna give you the stop sign. Yeah. Tyler has something to say.
So for the viewing or listening audience, I will apologize. I had to step away for a moment. Did we cover Tyrion and Jaime? The conversation in the tent?
That's the point I had to make.
We went into a very, very weird tirade about the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I can't even explain the roadmap we just went down.
The answer is no. The answer is no.
We didn't do crap. You shouted something about Esmeralda and then ended it with, I don't know books. There's no we in that conversation, buddy. That's your plank to walk.
Tyler, this is what happens when you leave us alone.
Apparently, I can't leave you guys unsupervised.
No, not even slightly.
Specifically, Gary. Gary can't be left alone unsupervised.
That could be a card.
He's like a Targaryen. You never leave him alone.
Nick, I'm probably going to take your point here then of, I thought the conversation Jaime and Tyrion had at the end of their conversation, I thought was one of the best interactions those two have had, because we finally truly see the love Tyrion had for Jaime and why Tyrion had such love for Jaime is because he basically said, you treated me like you didn't treat me like a monster. You were all I had. He's making it sound like Jaime was literally the only person throughout Tyrion's life that was nice to him without any reason, without any background reason to be. Jaime was just nice to Tyrion. Gary.
Part of me was just waiting for Jaime to just like snap Tyrion's neck, because he has a bad habit of like killing Lannisters to escape from jail. Also, as you mentioned this, I completely forgot this minor point in the episode. it's never covered again that he has any ramifications for releasing Jaime. Like the next day just goes on and no one pays attention that they just lost Jaime Lannister the night before a battle. Like no ramifications for Tyrion.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Maybe it's addressed in the next episode.
But then this goes to the problem I have with Jaime's character here at the end of the season, where he comes out and talks about, Jaime never really cared much for the people of King's Landing, but yet Jaime killed the Mad King who was getting ready to destroy and burn King's Landing with wildfire.
Correction. Jaime killed the Mad King to save his father, who is going to sack King's Landing.
That's not a correction.
Well, you said he did it to save the people of King's Landing. He did it for his own family. He could give a fuck about King's Landing. He cared about the Lannisters and the Lannister army. That's my point. Back to you. Sorry.
He has a moment after his hand gets cut off where I don't know where they are, but he's sitting in bathwater with Brienne. He says, "How many people have you saved?" And he tells Brienne, "I've saved," I think he says 1 million or 500,000 or something like that.
500,000.
He mentions all the half million. He mentions that he did save all those people. So even if he didn't intend to, he's aware that he did. So he does care enough to say that he saved them. He doesn't say, "I saved my father's army." He says, "I saved King's Landing."
Yeah, I think his father was the primary reason, but there can be other things. Of course, Tywin then sacked King's Landing. He didn't kill anywhere near the amount that would have died otherwise. And yet, I mean, King's Landing was kind of, for some reason, bitter about it towards Tywin for a while afterwards.
Even villains need a scorecard to justify what they've done.
Did we have anything else then to pick up before? Oh, Nick has something.
Yeah, so just catching up to where everybody else is at. Yes, I had down that every time the bells is referenced, nobody says okay. Everybody just kind of like nods or like seemingly shrugs it off. So it seems very not apt that that's going to be followed. Again, with the alienating, Dany tells Tyrion as he walks out, "The next time you fail me will be the last time you fail me." And again, just kicking all her advisors, either killing them or threatening them outright or pushing them further and further away. All these signs that Dany isn't really somebody who's trustworthy or in the right mind space right now, but nobody seems to do anything other than Varys tried to actually undercut or conspiracy theory poison her. I wrote down Tyrion needs to work on his Valyrian, as he says he wants to see the Skullkeeper or feed the Skullkeeper at the tent. Then, yeah, I had that comment that you had too, Tyler, about Tyrion mentions to Jaime to try and convince Cersei to surrender, if not for herself, then for the millions of innocents. And Jaime says, "To be honest, I never cared for the innocent, cared much for them, innocent or otherwise." And it seemingly, I wrote down, it seemingly undercuts the beautiful arc of repentance Jaime seems to have been on for the last few episodes and seasons. He seems to be honor-bound to keep his word in saving Catelyn Stark's daughters by equipping Brienne to go and save them with Lannister armor, and also honor-bound to his word that he said he'd fight for the living and goes up north knowing he'd be threatened to go do so. But seemingly doesn't seem to be honor-bound to care about the innocent people who will be burned if he comes down to King's Landing. It just seems, again, it could be poor writing. It probably is poor writing, but I had a couple comments on the Lannisters, and that was one of them. That the arc that they come to, or the conclusion they come to, is a disservice. And then, yeah, Tyrion comments how he never thought he'd be able to repay his brother for the favor, and he's making a reference to when his brother set him free after he killed his dad. And when they thought he was going to poison Dany. Then Tyrion says, "If Daenerys can take the throne without wading through a river of blood, maybe she'll show mercy to the person who made that possible." And Jaime shows Tyrion a very pointed look, and Tyrion kind of like shrugs it off. Everybody seems to know that Dany's not the merciful kind of person. And it's just, again, it's undercutting all these little notes that she's not going to show mercy. She's not going to be kind. She's not going to be the type of person who will consider what the bells mean. They say goodbye. I wrote down very touching. And yeah, then I jumped into the battle with Euron on the ships. Steven, I had a couple lines that I wrote strategy ? I'm curious for your insight on.
I'll let you go here after this little brief bit, Stephen. But I think it's kind of funny that Euron could hit Rhaegal from hundreds of meters out.
That's what I
dead
was going
on.
to say, jerk.
But on a boat sitting in the harbor, granted he has to fire into the sun, which apparently is the hard thing to do. He can't hit Dany and Drogon. But Stephen, you could more eloquently expand upon that point there.
So it's even a little worse than that. Not only can he not hit Dany on a because he was moving, like you said at first, he's not moving right now. They have fixed defenses with, the scorpions all across the walls. He has an entire fleet armed with scorpions. He could, in the words of what is it, Xerxes, blot out the sky with arrows. And instead, he just kind of goes, oh, I can't hit him, guys. He's gonna burn us all. This is the one naval victory that Dany ever wins, and it's so.
And it's not even with a proper
undeserved.
navy. It's an air attack on a naval fleet.
Which
not even one hit, and I feel like that dragon has a little bit of plot armor around them as the last dragon.
Yeah. No, you're right. And it's just absolutely, it makes no sense, and it hurts to watch, because I feel like there are clever ways you could have destroyed that fleet, and they just circumvent them all by just ignoring that.
I feel like if that was a scene in a video game where you had to take your dragon down into the whatever to destroy everything, the problem is whatever one you focus on, everything else, like you can focus on attacking this boat or that scorpion, but all the others are pointed at you. So like in a video game, that would have been a near impossible battle.
No, because in a video game, it's the same thing as in a video game. You only have one other person attack you at a time to make you feel like you're fighting everyone, but you're only fighting one person at once.
Or in a video game, you hide behind the rocks and take them out one at a time with little dart shots.
Unless she learned some good strategies, I was very impressed how that suddenly changed. Sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
You're good. I wrote down the ships seem really damn close. For a breath weapon, at one point there's like an overhead shot of her flying down on the ships, and it seems like you strafe one or two ways, you're going to get 6 ships at a time each direction you fly. I thought, like, spread them out further. Get them further away. Like you said, even if you shoot at the dragon that's firing at that ship, then all the other ships are going to shoot at that ship. Like, spread them out further so that you're not shooting at each other either.
We just save time and say that the whole ship part and the whole ballista is just completely inconsistent. Like, I don't think, is anyone going to defend it? I'll let Nick defend this. And then we could just move on.
It. Oh, the scorpions were very crappy.
I hate how the scorpions were built up every single time we saw them, about being so deadly, so powerful, so efficient, and just hundreds of them in this episode. And I don't think they could have hit. I could have been out there. I could have been going, waving my arms around like a wacky wavy inflatable arm flailing tubeman, and nothing. It was stupid. And so I guess next on the strategy, going off on strategy, I noticed again that once again you have big walls, and the way that the Golden Company decides to use said walls is by mustering outside of them, because that's apparently how we do sieges in this world. Is you don't use the walls until you need them, I guess. I will say the destruction of all the go back to a couple episodes ago, we were talking about what does fire do? Does it burn people? Does it explode? Does it incinerate? Now it explodes. So imagine if
it
that
destroyed
same.
a huge wall section of the wall.
Remember when she burned to death Varys earlier in this episode? Imagine if he had used that and it just exploded and by mistake killed everyone there. Oops. So that was interesting as well. I did think that if I was Daenerys, I would have gone for the ships personally last, and I would have gone for the emplacements first on the wall because they would be more steady, and your troops are on the ground; they're not in the ocean. So that's a questionable decision, but Dany's a questionable person. And then I will say the breaching of the wall with fire, dragon fire. I want your guys' take on this. Has anyone in Cersei's camp seen the power of this dragon fire to break down walls? Because they don't seem like they are prepared for Dany just to go oop and burn the wall. And it's I feel like they should have known. But I can't remember if anyone's ever seen this. Maybe it's actually this big a shock value to them.
Historically, you should know because Harrenhal was burned by Dragonfire. That should be your
Harrenhal was
historical.
Melted.
Anyway, semantics. The power of dragons was alluded to historically in that location, which shows up and is a central point of a handed-off castle several times in earlier seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, I mentioned this when I was watching to Stephen when I was watching the episode earlier, but King's Landing is actually in the books described multiple times as it's not a very pretty city. It is not a very built up city in terms of stone. It is built of wood. It is a wood and mud city. It is not a very graceful looking, beautiful creation like Old Town or something. So it burns easily. In the show, they make it out of this beautiful looking, like Mediterranean-esque place, which I imagine that stone doesn't burn quite so instantly, or unless Drogon's got some ability to just instantly unlock mortar when he breathes fire at a building, and because I mean, multiple times you see him shoot a little fire, and all
right trigger.
All the bricks just instantly fall individually. So I assume it's the mortar just dissolves.
All of the city was secretly built with gunpowder laced inside the cement and mortar and everything like that. So when the fire hits, it just explodes.
Ooh,
that makes sense. I mean, we've got the wildfire already.
Conspiracy theory.
Wildfire's going
on. Do I have
conspiracy
to say
theory.
that before that? Do I have to say conspiracy theory before?
Yes, you do.
You do.
Number 5.
Number
5. We're gonna count it. Okay.
So Amanda does bring up a good point, though, is that this city is supposed to be made of wood, and honestly, Daenerys didn't need to use dragon fire to burn it all down. They could have had like 3 catapults with fire. And by the way, they don't bring any siege engines, so they're kind of putting all their eggs in one basket here. But regardless,
Steven, there's no engines in this this world. Keep your modern day marvels out of this story.
Gary, they do yell fire when they shoot the scorpions, even though there's no like combustible weapons in this. Wouldn't they yell like loose or something?
Yes,
release, loose.
Fair
but
enough. I accept that point.
Very famously, historically, you've had the city of Rome burnt by Nero because it was all made of wood, and after it was all burnt down, then it was remade in marble, and that's how it got remade. So, like, that's how I assume the city would look: is Rome pre-Nero, and maybe that's Daenerys' call. Maybe that's what we're actually missing here. Conspiracy theory number 6. George R.R. Martin just wrote Daenerys as a stand-in for Nero. But yeah, I guess that's where the strategy kind of stops, because it's like a one big boom bang, and then they rush the gap. Yeah, you'd rush the gap if you blow open a hole in the wall. and that's the end of the strategy. Then they starting to sack the city, and then we get to the bells, and I'll let someone else take the bells.
Quick shout out to the Golden Company and Harry Strickland for surviving all of a few moments before being completely overrun.
Do you think that's what they told him when you're like, hey, we want to hire you for 5 minutes?
What's he from? Harry Strickland.
No, that's his name.
Couldn't place it.
Oh, like what's he from as an actor?
Yeah, I think that's
Give me a second here. I'll go look for that.
IMDb.
He looked familiar, but I didn't bother to look that up. I did not have it.
While Tyler's looking that up, the standoff, all I could think about was be cool from Pulp Fiction. Just be cool, guys. Be cool. Like when they have that standoff and the Lannisters are like standing there before they throw it on their swords. It's like, be cool, everybody. Be cool. Like, be cool. Be cool.
Was this your Mexican standoff you alluded to in your intro?
Yes. 2 giant armies just standing 10 feet apart, just staring at one another and trying to figure out who's gonna, like, do we need to fight? Are you guys, like, really hell-bent on sacking the city, or can we just, like, put down our swords and we'll be okay?
So who fights first? Do you fight first? I fight first?
Like, we kind of sort of realize you have dragons, so, like, we don't really want to fight, and if you're gonna let us live, we could just let you walk by. Okay?
Did have a note
Real quick
on our boy Tor. Oh, go ahead.
Hold on, real quick. This isn't going to change the subject. Harry Strickland is actually played by Mark Reisman. Mark Reisman played in The Man in the High Castle, The Last Kingdom, and Overlord.
Did Tyler search something? Do we need to make sure he didn't stop the recording?
Keep going, Gary.
Oh no!
Thank you.
Ooh.
All right, you can go.
I was just gonna comment quick on our boy Torgo Nudo. Grey Worm has always worn his helmet into battle because he's a soldier. In this siege, he has no helmet from the beginning. He's not a soldier. He's all emotion and vengeance.
All right. Well,
I'd
someone's
argue with
noticing-
you, but there's been a lot of different battles.
Hey, you mentioned that he's all vengeance. I noted, I'm going to jump ahead, which is that both Daenerys and Grey Worm hear the bells, and they both, like, on a rewatch, I realized Grey Worm doesn't accept surrender either. Daenerys hears the bells, and she seems angry about the idea of surrender. Like, she wanted to rape and pillage, and Grey Worm wanted just straight up revenge, as any, like his girlfriend got murdered in front of him, like very brutally, to make a point that had nothing to do with her. So he just wanted revenge, and he's the catalyst that changes the ground war. It's just because he did not want to accept surrender at that point. That's not why he was there.
Well, I was going to say real quick, we should have someone introduce the bells as to what happens real quick.
What happens? I just like the murder and the violence.
I know.
They're bells, they ring. Who knows why? Reasons are unclear.
It is supposed to be a tonal shift in the episode, assigned by a audio cue.
Okay.
Tyler?
I just want to make a quick shout out here too. Andy the Extra is seen several times in this episode, standing next to John.
Andy.
I will say. So going back to, I guess, what Gary was saying, though, I do think that there's very war criminally things going on in this episode, obviously, and it's a deliberate choice by both parties. And I would say there are two. There is the Adolf and there's Heinrich, and Adolf's flying the dragon and Heinrich's on the ground. And you're right, Gary. Neither of them want to accept surrender. They both want to murder, kill, just rape, pillage, slaughter everyone, and it's I don't know. I feel like this is a culmination of their characters. I don't feel like this is out of left field, as I have been mentioning since we started. I feel like this is a
I have to interrupt there, folks,
Oh.
for everyone. That was Steven's "I told you so" moment. He's been dying to say it since the beginning of the entire show.
she's not wrong.
Take your
Go ahead,
victory
Steven.
lap, Steven.
But it's I don't. This is, you see her break. You see Daenerys visibly break when the bells are going off, but you also see her contemplate what the decision is going to be. I think that the bells go off and she's staring daggers at the Red Keep, and she starts looking around kind of with this really freaky, look, which, hey, shout out to the actress. She plays a really good psychopath. But starts looking around, and you could see the hamster in her head is running at full force, and that hamster then slips and falls off the wheel, and that wheel just fucking goes, and she decides that she's not gonna. I think it would make more sense to me if that hamster went and decided, yeah, we're gonna burn down Red Keep. She doesn't, though. She burns down the city first. So I think that is very important. I think it's very important that Grey Worm is looking for a victory, and he gets his victory when everyone surrenders to him, and then he kills them anyways. And he does that twice. It's not, well, I guess, is that in the next episode as well? Or is that where he's murdering a whole bunch of captives?
That's next episode. Right. I mean, there are. I mean, it's technically captives too, because everyone has thrown down their sword as well.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say he does it twice, and so I didn't know if it was 2 times in this episode or once now. But so yeah, Grey Worm kills a whole bunch of captives. Just starts a absolute slaughter, just because he's angry, and it just I don't know, goes to show what Dany stood for the entire time. Tyler.
As just kind of a funny aside here, I was going to point out here that it looks like we've always talked about how the Unsullied are just terrible soldiers.
They're gone now.
But apparently, no, the Unsullied.
Oh, sorry.
Apparently, they're good at slaughtering random innocent or random people who can't really fight back very well. So, props to that. You are right, though. Speaking of the people who were gone are now back, the Dothraki just happened to show up and ride through the city. And then to jump a little bit ahead too to what they talked about on the inside the episode part here too, you're right. It makes no sense that they talk about how she sees the Red Keep and it's kind of like a symbol of everything that was taken from her family and all of that, but yet she then turns and just destroys the entire city first instead of, I don't know, maybe go after the Red Keep where your enemies truly are and level it to the ground. Yeah. Amanda.
You're muted.
Sorry. Steven and I highly disagreed on this point earlier when I was watching the show, and we have very different opinions on Dany. But I honestly found it confusing or I would have found it more convincing had she started immediately burning everyone down. Like, if she had not paused. She paused, she stopped, she took her bearings and contemplated. And you could argue this either way. Like, Steven's right, you can argue this, that she makes the deliberate choice to burn it down. To me, honestly, it would have made more sense had she not paused. Like, had she just gone straight into it, and I could have bought that as like she just couldn't pull herself off of that. But to me, it made less sense that she paused and did it. Like, I understand that we have been multiple times pointed out that she did have this possibility all along, but I would have counted it more if she had just chosen to ignore the bells and keep going rather than stopping, considering, waiting, hearing them, considering some more, and then being like, I'm done. Like, why? Or what was in her mind?
Also, you're talking about, that point where she snaps, or does she keep going? I'm pretty sure after you see the initial, strafe run, and it's obvious that it's civilians, I don't kn- when I think about it, I don't think you see Danny or the dragon very much again the rest of the episode. You just see the city's burning, you see the Red Keep is crumbling, but you don't actually see Danny's face the second, once the bells ring, you don't see her face, I think, the whole rest of the episode. Whoever had a finger up? Who's holding fingers? Nick, what do you got to say?
I got fingers. I had a note that when you see her take off and she starts strafing on the city, there's a couple far away shots from either over Cersei's shoulder where she's watching the chaos, or from just the city. It looks like Dany's not only like randomly taking out her aggression on the city, she's meticulously going back and forth from far away to the city to closer and closer to the Red Keep. You talk about the criminal intent, she's not just psychotically going after people. She's meticulously homicidal and being.
She's literally burning a road all the way to the Red Keep, so anyone in the city has no escape. They literally have to either choose the Red Keep or fire
or death. Yeah, it's there is no safety. It's all of the citizens. Yeah. I also noticed too that there's a scene where a quick flash where the dragon flies over the city and you see the shadow, which was something that I had highlighted in an earlier episode in one of Bran's quick highlights there. And we don't have to get into it now because it's getting late. But if you look into predetermination, was this something that was always going to happen, or a possible future outcome that Bran saw? And if Bran knew it was a possible outcome, why the hell didn't he say something to somebody earlier? Yada, yada, yada.
I think because I originally, when I'd seen that, I always assumed it was a flashback to when dragons did fly over. But it was fascinating the first time I watched this, when I was like, oh, because I did remember that because it was a cool shot.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to ask you guys, or not ask, but I thought it was interesting switching over to Cersei a little bit here. Cersei knows that she's fully aware of her own self being a complete and total tyrant, and the assumption that she has that no one else will reach the same depravities that she will amazes me, because she thinks it's weakness in other people. But in this case, she literally motivated what ended up being her greatest enemy to do just that to her. But at the same time, she mentions the Red Keep has never fallen and it won't fall today. We were much less optimistic when Stannis attacked, who had nowhere near these kinds of resources. Way worse odds. And she's literally watching the city get burned down by a dragon with the ability to, dissolve mortar and make explosions. The Red Keep has never fallen. Okay, are you watching something different than what I am? You almost gave your son and yourself poison to when there was a possibility of this way less than this before. I don't know. Do you guys think Cersei's just talking herself way too positively there?
It's probably the hard to admit defeat quality. She just can't accept that she's lost. It's just not something that has entered her mind.
Sipping her own Kool-Aid. I agree with that.
I just thought it was strange. I mean, she's been in that situation before, and at that point she was she clearly knew, because she told Sansa in great detail exactly what was going to happen to all of them should the city fall. I mean, maybe that's a good example. I mean, her ability to see things clearly and predict the future is very clouded now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
What else we got? Oh, one last note about Cersei. Jaime and Cersei, not a good love, possibly abusive. There is an interesting level of care, though. She felt when she saw him she was relieved to see him. She felt safe enough to cry to him. He always, however, cared less about him than he did about her. She doesn't deserve his love. Selfish to the end. She cares for Jaime in a way, but she also tells him not to let her die in a way that she would
Totally.
never have done for him. He sacrificed everything to save her. She would totally not have done that for him.
I had that note as well. She doesn't say, "We're gonna die, don't let us die." It's "don't let me die." Me. Not a fan. Not a fan of that.
Mm-mm.
Speaking of Jaime there too, fuck Euron Greyjoy, he's finally gone.
Yeah,
You
and
mean,
that
the future
smug
king?
little God, at the very end, then that smug little guy, I killed Jaime Lannister. Fun fact, you didn't.
Yep.
You probably would have eventually, but
This scene was
I like-
specifically where I put several ripoffs of The Princess Bride. The fact that Jaime got stabbed twice, like very aggressively, and still like walks around for another 20 minutes in the show, like
that's
just
some serious stairs too.
yeah, like
You know, we twist our ankle and we struggle up a one flight of stairs, and Jaime gets stabbed through the liver, and he makes it up all the way into the Red Keep.
With
Yeah.
flesh wound.
Tis but a flea bite.
Back me, knave. I liked the little Euron thinks he's won, and he's like, "For a cripple," and then he sees that Jaime's crawling towards a sword, and Euron's like, actually has to get up and finish him off. It was funny.
We also get the send off from Sandor and Arya there. Of
That was a good one.
Sandor basically saying, "Do you want to be like me? Do you want to live your life full of hate and seeking nothing but vengeance and everything like that, or do you want to go live your life there and everything?" Which was, I thought, really beautifully poetic there. That at the end, when she says goodbye, Sandor, basically she calls him by his name. It's kind of like one of the only people who's ever truly treated him like a person here, and not just this big brute.
the Hound. I think it might be I take it back. It's not the only time he's called Sandor. I think the guy who rescues him calls him Sandor Clegane. I don't think he specifically calls him the Hound, but the only person who's ever called him Sandor instead of the Hound. Nick. Okay, Nick doesn't have anything to say. Back to you, Tyler.
Heck with you. I did have that note as well, that it's a quick change there, but I think it's kind of warranted, where Arya has this whole killer baby mentality where she's walking through the streets and going in to get Cersei. When Sandor truly explains to her, like, all right, this is where it actually comes down to it. You will die if you keep going this route. You need to be better than me. And he confronts her. You see her demeanor change, and she does have more of that early seasonal version of Arya, where she's more timid. She realizes she's in an unsafe area, and it's no longer, I have the skills and the determination and the grit to get me out of here. It's, holy crap, I may die doing what I'm doing. It seems a little quick to me, but I do like the acknowledgement that there are greater forces than her in her current situation. Steven.
It seems strange to me that she has that flip, because the Arya that I think we all are well aware of at this point doesn't really care about death, honestly. So when being confronted with a situation where she might die, and someone just shaking her really good on the shoulders and saying, "You might die," honestly, I expect Arya to go, "Yeah, and?" I don't understand. There is no lead up as to why she makes that change in her head, why she transitions from stone cold killer who will die to get the job done to, oh, maybe my life is important. and then move on with your life, sort of thing. Gary is emphatically putting a finger up to talk. So Gary,
Gary, don't flash our listeners that finger. That's rude, man.
Sorry, everyone. I guess I can't believe I'm saying this, Steven, but if someone was to tell Arya to not choose violence, does it make the sense that Sandor Clegane is the one to say it, that he's the one to deliver the message?
no.
Very little much I'll defend this about Arya at all. I think I mentioned earlier characters that could be written out of the episode and made no difference. Arya Stark could have been written out of this episode, saved 10 minutes of plot.
But then we
she
wouldn't have
only
gotten to see everyone die in detail.
Yeah, she only exists, and after the episode, the writers acknowledge it. She only exists to show the chaos and the atrocities of war, and to give some emotional impact. However, at some point, especially on the rewatch, like it gets frustrating because she has so much plot armor around her. Like, she survived for 2 minutes, and once she survived for that long, it was almost inevitably she was going to get out of the episode. There wasn't a climactic point where I thought she could have bit the dust. Steven?
You know what would have actually been a really ballsy decision by the show writers here would be to not put Arya in that position, but to follow someone we don't know and we don't care about. Someone just a random citizen in the city going through that same travails, and maybe they don't survive. How much cooler would that have been?
I love that.
Nick.
I had that same point I was going to make too as well. Two real quick things. One, like if we had followed the mother and daughter from the whole episode to their end, that would have been really cool because we don't know them, but we're watching them for so long. Who are these people? Are they going to make it out? They seem to kind of have gotten this far, and then boom to that point.
Nick,
I
they
was
even
gonna say
kind
really
of
quick.
they even kind of like set it up too, of like they kind of introduced these random characters, like, oh, hey, here's some people, and then here's some more shots of them. So yeah, they would have been
Right,
the
they're in.
perfect
They're in.
stand-ins.
And Arya even makes, I had a note earlier too, like when they're trying to get to the gate, Arya looks at them and makes note of them. So like there are people that are not just bystanders, like our main characters take note of them. Really quick on the Arya thing, I would have liked, in regards to her shift in tone there, I would have liked if she'd grown from her last two battles, because when she was leading up to the night, the long night, she was like, I know death has many faces and I've feared the many-faced god yet, but she's like not really scared. And then we have that horror scene, quote unquote, when she's in the library and she seems terrified, but then immediately afterwards she's riding a horse down to King's Landing with Sandor, like, if you come with me you may not make it out. I don't care, neither do I. It's like I would have rather her grown from that and been like, I know that death is a possibility, but I need to stop Cersei, or to take the gravitas of mortality to more seriousness. I would have bought that as a lead-in, or to this scene where Sandor gets a hold of her then and is like, okay, it's been fun to this point, but seriously, you need to go home. Like, that would have been had more weight to it than this high shift of, yep, now I'm tough as nails. Okay, now I know I may die. Now I'm tough as nails again because I didn't learn anything from my last interaction. To now, oh crap, yeah, I'm gonna die. It just seems implausible. Gary.
Oh, was Tyler? Did you have a point? Oh, I had one quick point, and that was, I think I mentioned like, oh, the gates are locked. I know a secret path. Arya and the Hound get into the Red Keep almost magically. I mean,
Yep.
I guess you could say the Hound probably knows how to traverse the Red Keep because he was in the Red Keep for several seasons. And same with Jaime. Jaime just miraculously knew where to go to get around everything. The last thing I had on Arya was that I don't know if it was a callback, but I rewinded the episode multiple times. The mother and daughter who get burned to death, I'm pretty sure that the daughter is holding a burnt wooden horse, which I think is a throwback to Baratheon.
Bareen.
Yeah.
Marine
But I thought it was just really weird. It was like, I didn't see the little girl with the horse before that, but they specifically cut to like, I assumed it was a horse.
I didn't see her holding it beforehand, but it does cut to it after she's dead.
I think
It's
like,
a reference to Gary. It's a reference to Tug Ho, Nut Ho.
I think it's a blink and you'll kind of just miss it part here too, because I do vaguely remember from my recent rewatch here that this character was holding this carved horse. I think it's like painted white with some decorative paint on it as well.
But I guess going back to Steven's point, or I don't know who remember, I think it was Steven. Like, if you followed a random character, this would have been a lot more impactful. And it could have just been somebody that Jamie ran into, because Jamie is in those interactions too. But yeah, Arya being in this whole episode was just a waste. Like, she could have just been bookended at the end of the last or whenever the long night was over. She just went off adventuring. Whatever. Anyway, that's all I got. I don't know who had points at this point.
Gary, I just pulled up a picture of IMDb, and immediately I see the girl is clutching this little white horse. I totally did not notice that before.
I think
Well, on the first run through, you would never look at the horse. Like, it's obviously the mother-daughter that's supposed to take your eye, but
I think
do you think it's a callback to the other horsey, or just a
I
random...
I agree. I definitely think so.
It wasn't a horse though to begin with. It was a stag.
That one was, yeah.
What's the difference between a horse and a stag?
Well, the callback was a stag, which would be a four-legged animal with antlers.
If you're not sure the difference between a horse and a deer, Gary, we will discuss that on another podcast, but...
Correct.
To be fair,
you're right.
To be fair,
the
horses that Gary likes do have horns. Then they're called unicorns, people.
That's fair. That is a fair statement.
Fair enough. Sorry, I didn't connect the dots between deer and stag. Sorry. Continue on. I'm an idiot.
Well, we'll have a separate podcast where we talk with Gary about random things.
Gary identifies animals in Gary's pronunciation of Valyrian words.
I don't know books.
I'm sorry, Gary. We've been really mean to you this episode.
Oh, it's fine. I started off at such a high note that everybody's got to cut me down from there.
Bring you back down to reality, Gary.
King of the hill.
The last real point I think to touch on for the episode would, and I don't know quite pop culture wise what it may have been, other than he rode in on a white horse there. The fact that Arya finds this random white horse, and am I making this up? Is there something out there of like he rode in on a white horse and his name was Death or something like that?
That is it's a reference to yeah.
To what? Sorry.
And Blade Runner.
Not Blade Runner, but no, it's I think it's Revelations.
Okay.
In Christian in the recounting of the Christian Revelations book, it's behold, there was a whiter who rode in upon a white horse, and his name was Death, or something to that effect.
Okay. Because then Arya stumbles across this white horse, and she is surrounded by the fallout of the death around her, basically, and apparently leaves the city. So maybe keep an eye on that point here might become relevant next episode. I don't know. But yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Am I to understand, Tyler, that's your last note on this episode?
Or do you want me to talk about the Clegane Bowl?
I was going to say, you're the one who's been trumping up the Clegane Bowl for the last 3 seasons. And Steven. I talked to Tyler much more than I talked to you about this recently.
I mean...
Go ahead.
Or
is it a minor footnote?
The poetry of the Hound sacrificing himself to kill his undead brother by launching him into a bunch of fire is there. The Hound was created by fire. Now he is ended by fire. Sure. It was
the battle sucked.
Yeah, I guess the coolest part about it was when they clanged swords together, and you could just kind of feel the shockwave reverberating out from that. But,
I think I was watching this part as well. I walked in with Amanda watching this part as well, and we were just discussing how absolutely lame Sandor is. Not Sandor. Sandor's the Hound, right?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Gregor. The
Gregor.
Mountain.
How absolutely
Gregor.
lame Gregor is as a zombie. Just like, yeah, you can kill him any which way, but you can't actually kill him because magic. And it's like, that's not a good villain. This is boring. This is
Like
I-
I've accepted that he's got some kind of zombie, like possibly doesn't feel pain or whatever, and he's obviously crazy strong. Even if you don't feel pain, a dagger through the eye and brain is gonna
Yeah.
do something to slow you down.
and you know what? They can say all day long that, oh well, Clyburn was a weird dude doing weird experiments. He wasn't the Red Woman. He's not bringing people back from the life, unless we're talking that there is some. Also, maybe he has access to cybernetic implants or something. I don't know. It makes
I
no
forgot
sense.
how
Dumb.
quickly Qyburn dies. Like, I just completely forgot. Like, it's just like, F you, I'm going to throw you into a rock. Like,
Yeah, I did
okay.
too.
Also, I thought it was interesting that the mountain literally gouges the Hound's eyes out the same way he did to the Viper.
Yeah, because everyone. I think that was the audience's
You're
benefit, because everyone, when we watched
unbelievably
that happen to the Viper, went, "Oh my God, no!" And so, we're going to do that again.
Yeah, he's unbelievably brutish strong, but his weapon of choice is to gouge the eyes, not just crush
Crack
his
the
head.
Yeah.
Nick, you're up.
I also thought Qyburn died pretty quickly. I thought it was also equally funny how Cersei says no words and just peace out, like leaves right between them in the middle of the battle after that. She's just
Yeah.
like, okay, you two have a lot to talk about. I'm just gonna see myself out the door, and just leaves, and like nobody pays her any mind or stops her. It's like, hey, she's a huge piece on the chessboard too. Sandor could have easily like sliced her in half and then gone after the mountain or something, but it was just funny.
I think that she was important to him. Sorry, Steven.
I did also want to, before we pass this up, how easily the Hound just dispatches a couple of the Queen's Guard there,
Guard.
just like they're nothing. Like remember in the beginning of this series when, like, if you were a gold cloak, you were probably a horrible human being, but you were a swordsman, and now they're just like really crappy fighters. All right, Gary.
Conspiracy theory number 7.
Oh my.
Because they have the mountain around, those gold cloaks become complacent in their fighting skills.
I could see a stance of get behind Gregor as being a good option.
Battle plans. We form a flying V behind Gregor and let him just charge right into the enemy while they're.
We'll call ourselves the Mighty Flying Cloaks.
Yeah.
That's the crossover we didn't know we needed.
Again, every episode we have to keep adding pop culture to this thing in some random way or shape or form.
We got a Mighty Ducks. I dropped some Blade Runner, but I was wrong. Wasn't a horse in Blade Runner, it was a unicorn. I stand corrected.
Anyways, does anyone have anything else? Gary's done. Amanda's done.
I have
Steven.
one. Did we talk about the Jaime versus Euron?
Steven, you and I talked about it, and I wrote it
Yeah.
down in my notes of Jaime versus Euron battle. Who
so
cares?
lame. Like that's what I wanted to touch on, though, is on the notes of things that didn't have to happen in this episode. That battle did not have to happen. I could only discount Jack Sparrow fighting a broken down, bloodied, like, anti-hero. It was just that encapsulated for me the entire episode of just kind of lame, just a lot of fan service and lame. I don't know, Nick.
I could get behind that one. I think it would have been cooler to see Euron bite it in flame aboard his boat, thinking he could take down Dany, and then you have Jaime still end up getting crushed with Cersei under the pit, and both characters would end up dead without having to have this battle in the middle of it. could see that. I had a note about the Jaime and Cersei fighting each other note too. I'd mentioned multiple times how Dany's closest allies all seem to abandon her and leave her. But Cersei, who has been one of the most violent and antagonistic characters in the show, gets Jaime to come back to her. I thought that was kind of crap, me personally. Yeah, it's like, I personally don't agree with it because it's a character who, in my opinion, doesn't deserve graciousness or love or a humbling scene, but somehow gets to go out in the arms of the person who cares for her the most. It seems like that's comforting to somebody who has been absolutely anything but in this show. I didn't really like that particular part, but it's my 2 cents. Through a lot of the battles, barbarous Northmen, terrible things. We talked about how Jaime is trying to find a way out and save them both, but Cersei's just crying, saying, "Don't let me die here." I think that was yours, Samantha.
She is, up until the very end, she is so selfish. It's just absolutely insane. She mentions her child in passing, her unborn child in passing, about how I want him to live because I want to live, basically. And it's just.
She says.
Oh.
She even says "my baby." She doesn't say "our baby," our child. It's "I want my baby to live. I don't want to die here." It's like, damn, girl.
Also, with that point too, it's kind of interesting how the show now decides she's pregnant again.
Yeah.
I mean, she was always pregnant.
They insinuate a couple things, that she lost it or that it's Euron's, or I mean, we've seen months go by, presumably, and she does not look pregnant.
Yes.
Can assure you there would be some kind of showing.
It's so many of these characters. Like, I believe that other characters had really good wrap-up ends in previous episodes where they die and it matters to some extent, even a little bit. And to watch Jaime go out in such a dumb way, to watch Cersei go out in such a dumb way, to watch Euron go out. I don't care about Euron anymore. He could have been cool. He's not cool. To watch the Hound go out in such a dumb way, it's just. I don't know why they couldn't have made it a little bit more impactful for those. You can make everyone else dying in the city impactful. I couldn't care less that Jaime was being buried by rubble because he deserves it at this point.
Do you feel like all of those villains had a less cinematic ending than the hero of the revolution, who was eaten by
Yes.
dogs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Because the hero of the revolution went
powerful.
out in a way that was befitting to how he should go out.
Yeah.
Everyone
Yes.
else went out in a way that was like, okay.
Poetic justice.
And same with the Cleganes. The Cleganes went out in like a very, like, I don't know, just trying to wrap up
So
plot lines and remove characters from the show.
the Cleganes fighting one another was a very fitting thing for their story. The way they go out is kind of terrible.
Lame. Yes.
Really? I kind of like that. I don't know how else you
I
stop a
feel like
zombie.
they could have
Crash
died in
gravity.
fire, but they
He
fell
shouldn't
out
have
of a
been
castle.
zombie.
It's
I
Sandor dying to fire, I think, is the poetic way for him to kind of like overcoming the fear of fire and somehow using that to his benefit of taking out his zombified brother. It's just
I think he should have pushed him into a bonfire, would have been more noble than like pushing him out of a castle. Like out of a
yeah.
I think it's the fall that does it. Into a fire, I feel like if he's a zombie and a stab through the eye won't do it. He just stand back up and come at him on flame.
That's the thing too, is like how much of the area around them is really on fire, because I mean it's not lava they're falling into, it's not napalm that's
Floor's
just
lava.
sitting there, whatever. It's like just buildings are on fire, so it is ultimately the fall that's going to kill them. Really.
maybe he should have taken his own advice and be like, if Cersei's gonna die, there's an excellent chance the mountain's gonna get crushed too.
Conspiracy theory number 8. Sandor Clegane actually jumps his brother out the door, out the thing to fall like that because he's gonna pull a Dark Knight and land on him and survive. And now Sandor is somewhere in this world alive.
Just before he hits the ground, Danny comes by and catches him, but Clegane hits the ground.
Maybe a theme for these last couple seasons is that every villain has a less than notable death, because even the
Night King.
White Walker King, the
Night King.
Night King. The Night King has kind of a
lame way of dying as well. Yes,
yeah.
You're right.
So is it just that the show wraps up and the reason people get frustrated is that every villain gets sort of a bland death? Tyler?
I mean, you're kind of hitting on the whole problem I think people have at the ending of the show, but I don't want to like. This is a great conversation to have. This is the wrong recording to have that episode to have that conversation in. So
I do what I want.
I'm always well aware of that. We try to stop you as much as we can.
I believe most of this recording is example of that.
I haven't dropped any spoilers this episode. So anyway,
yes.
I think we hit all my points. I forgot about Jaime and Cersei. So thanks for covering that, Nick.
Nick, did you have anything else?
My last comment on this episode was, many ways this episode pulls the rug out from under us and exposes the terrible truth that most characters are capable of doing terrible atrocities. Very defeatist in its interpretation, the episode does precisely what I believe they were trying to do. Rather than culminate and conclude the arc of a very dangerous tyrant, it sets up the final episode, leaving us with an even more dangerous one. That's what they tried to do. And say they did it well.
My brow is furrowed. My brow is furrowed.
What did you think they tried to do?
You look fine to me, Steven. You're fine.
I think my computer's trying to scan right now. I hate this McAfee stuff. Anyways, I think that the showrunners, I don't think they're near as poetic as you're trying to make them out to be. I think they came in here going, big fight. We're going to have this massive thing. Everyone's going to die in the symbolic way that we're going to have killed. But everyone's going to die in a symbolic way, but we don't want to think too hard about it. So we are going to just run through everything. An episode which could have been 2 episodes before the siege and during the siege is now condensed into 1 episode because for whatever reason they did not want to extend this to a proper season length. I have no idea why. I want someone to convince me, tell me that. But this, like what we were saying, we have better ideas than the show writers with this. I don't want to follow Arya with plot armor, seeing all these people die, because the plot runners think, hey, people like Arya, people want to watch Arya. Let's have people watch Arya. I want to watch some random civilian that has no chance of surviving go through and get just about to safety and then get killed. Like I want to see that. And I expect more from HBO. I don't expect them to come up with an episode like this.
Yeah. Sorry, your voice is starting to go a little hoarse here at the end of the night. So again, this will touch on a lot of the conversation I imagine that we are going to have with our wrap-up episode. But the problems we are running into with our complaints with these episodes, these past few episodes, are the fact that we are racing towards an ending. We're not even running. We're not sprinting. We are literally walking, jogging, anything like that. We are literally racing towards the finish line here because they set out saying they had 13 hours of story left to tell. So I keep harping that or beating that dead horse, as Nick likes to keep reminding me here. But they are just in a race to try and get this last story told and hit all of these beats that may have been outlined in George's final draft of this is where everything's going to hit or end up here. So they are trying to hit all of these points here at the end and not really giving any of these points room to grow, breathe, or kind of develop here into a concluding thing that would not please everyone, but satisfy the viewers. All right. So, anyone have anything else they want to touch on for this episode? Getting a bunch of nods. Looks like we're all good. Looks like thumbs up and everything like that. All right. Well, that'll then conclude it for this episode. For our next episode, we will be watching the grand finale of Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 6, titled The Iron Throne. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening here. We hope we didn't bore you too much, and we hope you have a great time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody, thanks for listening.